Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through a warped doorway off a grimy London street into one of the strangest and honestly kind of sticky living situations the Victorian age had to serve up. Tonight we're slipping through a warped doorway off a grimy London street into one of the strangest and honestly kind of sticky living situations the Victorian age had to serve up. That's right, you're checking into a boarding house, you've got your single bag. Your final coin is sweating in your palm, and the second you lay eyes on the building, well, let's just say it's not exactly the dignified townhouse you were picturing. That's right, you're checking into a boarding house, you've got your single bag, your final coin is sweating in your palm, and the second you lay eyes on the building, well, let's just say it's not exactly the dignified townhouse you were picturing. You're not here for the aesthetics, though. You're here because London's bleeding you dry. Your wages come in pennies, and this place, this magnificent creaking coal-stained heap of masonry is the only spot that'll give you shelter without interrogating your past. And believe me, you're far from the only one carrying secrets you'd prefer to keep buried. You won't believe this, but these establishments were so widespread back then, they accounted for nearly a third of the housing in working-class London. An entire district might be held together by nothing but these cramped, deteriorating, multi-tenant mazes where everybody overhears everything and nobody respects boundaries. All right, before you settle in, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, but only if it feels right. And tell me, where are you tuning in from and what hour is it where you are? Lower those lights, turn on that fan for some ambient noise, and let's ease into tonight's little journey. You move toward the structure, pulling your coat closer. The rain doesn't fall here. It leaks off rusted gutters, off soot-covered windows, off the brim of the fellow who just hurried past, without acknowledging your existence. You'd take offence, but you're already watching where you step because there's something slick on the stones, and it might have been food once, or soap, or something far worse. The boarding house hunches between two taller structures, like it's been shamed. There's a placard above the entrance, painted once, flaking forever, that reads simply, "Rooms to let weekly." One of the O's has chipped away, so it also reads RMST let appropriate, you knock. The door groans open before you even finish tapping. A woman looks out, grey strands escape from a cap that might have been white once. Her gaze sharpens. Not suspicious exactly, just practical. "You're the late arrival?" she states plainly. You start to ask, late for what? But she's already spun on her heel. You trail her inside, the corridor's cramped, draped with faded green paper that peels away from the seams like it's attempting an escape. There's a peculiar odour, part cabbage, part coal residue, part something botanical gone sour. Somewhere overhead, floorboards moan like they're processing the news of your entrance. She doesn't offer you a walkthrough. Nobody in a Victorian boarding house offers walkthroughs. You learn through experience. You pass a cramped parlour on the left. There's one fractured teacup perched on the shelf, a chair lacking a leg, and a fireplace containing nothing but yesterday's cinders. The woman glances back and mentions, "Don't enter there past 10, light tax." You assume she's kidding. You'll discover later, she's absolutely serious. The stairs whine beneath your weight as you follow her upward. She doesn't bother checking back, just announces, "You get the attic, quieter, cheaper." On the third step, a door to your right cracks open, an eye materialises, then disappears. You pretend you didn't catch it because somehow that seems like the appropriate social move. At the landing, the landlady halts. She pivots, forces a tarnished key into your grip, and motions upward toward the final climb. Breakfast is your concern. I don't prepare meals, don't request. Hot water's Monday and Friday unless someone's greedy. And you don't disturb my door unless the building's ablaze. A beat, and even then consider carefully. She vanishes back down the staircase. Just like that, you're isolated. You ascend. The attic door resists slightly before surrendering. You step into your new quarters. It's angled, not figuratively, literally. The floor descends from left to right, like the entire space is attempting to slip into the alley beyond it. The bed is jammed against the partition at a slant. There's one pane, but it's clouded from within. A chair leans against the corner like it's surrendered. Still, it's moisture-free. It's your domain, and in a metropolis like this, that's sufficient. You shut the door. It doesn't quite catch. You wedge a boot against it and perch on the bed, absorbing the sounds of the structure adjusting to your presence. Pipes wheezing, floorboards protesting, someone coughing 2 stories down. This is where the actual narrative starts. You recline on the sparse mattress, which reacts by releasing a cloud of particles that smells vaguely of dampness and lavender, though you suspect the lavender expired long ago, and what remains is just the ghost of a sachet, buried somewhere in the fabric. Beyond the pane, the gas lamps flicker weakly, barely illuminating the passage below. Somewhere down there, a cat wails like it's trying out for the opera. And then there's quiet, except for the gentle drip of moisture from a damaged gutter above your quarters. You think about all the tales you've absorbed about these establishments. Humans packed in like utensils in a compartment, tissue-thin partitions, pilfered food, and strangers who never bother learning your identity. The quarters might be crooked, the wallpaper might be shedding like a reptile changing skin, but it's still yours for 7 shillings weekly. 8 if you want the coal, which you're informed you don't. The coal here is loosely defined, occasionally substituting for damp branches or recycled fireplace residue. You'll master the technique soon enough. Exchange assistance for warmth. Wedge the window with a utensil handle to block the draft, and always position a teacup beneath the leak above the table. You conduct a swift assessment of the quarters. There's the bed, the chair, a table with 1 unstable leg, and a compact iron basin in the corner with 2 handles, neither of which seem to produce anything but a rusty wheeze. A damaged mirror dangles askew on the partition, reflecting just enough of your features to make you resemble a dubious character from a crime serial. And then there's the odour. Not offensive, just complex. A touch of smoke, a suggestion of vinegar, something floral, and a profound undertone of boiled starch that never quite abandons these kinds of establishments. You'll discover later that most of it originates from the starching vessel the landlady employs on her own collars every Sunday. She prefers them rigid enough to slice vegetables. You settle in the chair, which vocally objects. It feels like every piece of furniture in here has witnessed something you probably shouldn't inquire about. Somewhere down below, a voice erupts with laughter. It rebounds up the stairwell, followed by a different voice, deep and rough, clearly irritated. The partitions may be flimsy, but rumours move quicker than sound. Within the hour, you'll know who laughed, who complained, and the reason. Someone's trousers wound up soaking wet on the railing again. There's no reception committee, no orientation, no nameplate on your entrance. But you sense the attention, not in an eerie supernatural way, in a very human who's the fresh tenant and do they snore way. In these establishments, solitude is less a privilege and more a brief coincidence. You'll discover that if you want peace, you have to negotiate for it, or contribute tea, distribute newspaper fragments, or in desperate cases, forfeit your turn at the wash tub. Your bag remains sealed on the floor. You realise you're uncertain whether to unpack or to keep things prepared, just in case this proves to be one of those establishments. You know the variety, the ones where the wallpaper masks last week's rodent situation, and the landlady's recollection becomes mysteriously flexible when it comes to commitments about decent lighting or fresh coating, but you're too exhausted to worry. You lean back, studying the low, fractured ceiling, and absorb the whispers and groans of a structure that's older than most of its occupants. You've entered a domain that isn't quite a residence, not quite a hotel, not quite a refuge, but something between a waiting area for lives in transition. You think about the other souls within these partitions. You haven't encountered them yet, but already they're woven into your narrative. The shoemaker who labours nights, the woman with an absent husband and a pet rabbit, the fellow who insists he was once a footman for a nobleman and now hones blades for survival. You don't know their identities, not yet, but shortly you will, you always do. You close your lids, and from downstairs, as if rehearsed, a utensil clatters loudly to the floor. Then, silence. Welcome to your lodgings. The following morning, you're roused not by daylight, because the attic pane is too fogged for that absurdity, but by the sharp, irregular clack-clack of someone stomping up the stairs in footwear that sounds too substantial for the size of their stride. They halt just outside your entrance. A pause, then 3 crisp knocks. You jolt up, strike your shin on the frame of the bed, and attempt to sound composed when you rasp. Yes, a voice responds, detached and matter-of-fact. Rent's due at the week's conclusion, no delayed payment, no weekly justifications, and if you need anything repaired, repair it yourself. Or, inform me, and I'll disregard it more gradually. It's her, the landlady. You can't observe her through the entrance, but you can practically hear her bun constricting as she speaks. Tea's downstairs if there's any remaining. Someone incinerated the toast again. Then the footsteps withdraw, a floorboard protests, and the rest is silence. You don't hurry to rise. Something indicates that haste isn't exactly valued here. You pull on yesterday's garments and feel the chill of the wooden floor penetrate through your socks. Boarding houses don't include carpet, not unless it's secured and borrowed from a chapel in disrepair. By the time you reach the kitchen, if it can be described as such, the toast is indeed beyond rescue. Blackened edges sit abandoned on a damaged plate beside a vessel of tea that smells faintly of onion. You pour yourself a portion anyway. One thing you're already grasping, don't be particular or you'll starve. The kitchen is an unspoken neutral zone. It's where tenants converge for just long enough to evaluate each other's footwear, sniff at each other's breakfast, and retreat to their quarters with just enough material for the day's speculation. And supervising all of it, like a sovereign with a mop, is the landlady. Her identity, you've gathered, is Mrs. Timp. Nobody knows if she was ever unmarried or if there was a Mr., but everyone concurs she's witnessed things, possibly initiated a few of them. She's the variety of woman who wears her shawl like armour and wields her broom like a staff. Today she's positioned at the head of the table, a substantial black ledger open before her. She's not recording in it, just flipping pages deliberately, as though the gesture itself maintains the structure in order. The ledger is the genuine centre of the boarding house, more than the coal stove or the water reservoir. It contains rent transactions, quarters assignments, mysterious tallies labelled linen fund and mop damage, and as rumour suggests, a register of tenants who once dared to request an extra blanket. You claim a seat at the distant end of the table. She doesn't look up. "I don't require deposits," she declares, eyes still on the page. "If you depart without warning, I retain the sheets. If you remain more than 3 months, I still retain the sheets. Prevents disputes." You nod as if this makes complete logic. She flips a page. "Occupation?" she inquires. You blink. "Pardon. Your profession? I don't accommodate idlers unless they compensate extra to idle in silence. Are you a clerk, a cobbler, a poet, heaven forbid, or something productive?" You scramble for something that sounds respectable. "I handle accounts." She snorts. "So, you're one of the silent ones. Acceptable. No whistling past 8, no footwear on the railing. Don't inquire." She finally raises her gaze. "Rent. 7 shillings weekly. 8 if you want coal. 9 if you expect me to knock." She seals the ledger with a snap. That's your welcoming ritual. No handshake, no document. Just tea, toast, and conditions. As you rise to depart, you notice something peculiar. Beyond the ledger there's a miniature porcelain figurine. A shepherd, perhaps. His painted expression is fractured. You wonder if it signifies something, but you're clever enough not to inquire. Back in the corridor, you pass a small chalkboard with quarters numbers and strange marks beside them. Dots, dashes, asterisks. You're uncertain if they indicate rent settled or adversaries acquired. Either way, your quarters has a little squiggle next to it. Later you'll comprehend what that squiggle signifies. But for now you head back upstairs, sip your onion-scented tea and stare out the distorted pane. The week has commenced. As the week progresses, you begin to grasp just how much authority that ledger possesses. It's not merely a register of transactions, it's a silent instrument. Every tenant in the structure moves a little differently when Mrs. Timp's ledger is displayed. Some shuffle quicker, gaze downward. Others linger nearby, clearing their throats politely, attempting to make themselves appear both financially stable and invisible. The ones who owe currency don't vanish. They hover. They understand that if they disappear entirely, their possessions might be auctioned off within the hour, bed sheets and all. You witness your first confrontation on Thursday afternoon. You're returning from the grocer with a small parcel of yesterday's bread when you hear the voices reverberating down the stairwell. I informed you I'm reliable for it. Friday. I've heard Friday. 5 Fridays now, Mr. Pierce, I secured employment. You secured a bottle. Mrs. Timp is halfway up the stairs, ledger under one arm, hand gripping the railing like she's preparing to hurl someone down it. Mr. Pierce, a lanky fellow with a vest 2 fasteners short of presentable, clutches the railing like it owes him stability. You decelerate your steps, pretending to examine the wallpaper, which incidentally is peeling in long, miserable strips and may have once displayed a floral pattern before surrendering to soot. The tension between landlady and lodger could slice boiled beef. Finally she declares, "No currency, no coal, and I'm charging you extra for expectorating in the basin." We discussed the basin. I never expectorated in the... She silences him with a glare and continues upstairs. You never witness Pierce win a dispute after that. From then on, you begin noticing other indicators of the ledger's quiet tyranny. One tenant, Ms. Dooley, positions a dish of boiled sweets on the corridor table each Sunday after Mrs. Timp collects rent. It's not an apology, just a gentle incentive to remain on the landlady's favourable side. Another tenant, Mr. Haxby, begins sweeping the rear steps every morning. When someone inquires if he's angling for a discount, he shrugs and mutters, "Better the broom than the boot." You check your pockets 3 times daily just to ensure your rent hasn't wandered off. It's not just currency you fear losing, it's standing here. Settling rent punctually gives you leverage. It purchases you silence when you desire it. It purchases you a second ladle of stew when someone prepares too much. It purchases you occasionally. The landlady's faint, reluctant approval. That's worth more than gold in a structure like this. On Saturday evening you spot something fresh, a little fragment of paper folded carefully and tucked beneath the sugar container in the parlour. You unfold it out of curiosity, 1 week delayed. No illumination, no fire. It's not signed, but the handwriting is Mrs. Timp's, angular and precise, like it was sharpened on bone. The sugar container belongs to Miss Featherby, a woman who smells of rosewater and labours at the dressmaker's 2 streets over. You suddenly comprehend why she's been wearing the same cuffs all week and why she's been warming her tea by holding it near other people's portions. You refold the note and tuck it back. Not your concern. That's another regulation here. Solitude is sacred so long as you don't vocalise it aloud. And then there's your entry in the ledger. You haven't observed it naturally, but you know it exists. You imagine it states, Room 7, Clark, new, silent, possibly broke, consumes tea, doesn't whistle. Maybe there's a doodle next to your identity, maybe a squiggle. You'd inquire, but you won't, not yet. Instead, you head back upstairs, past the chalkboard, past Mr. Pierce, who's now polishing his footwear with a cloth that used to be a handkerchief, and back to your slanted little attic quarters. The ledger remains sealed that evening, resting beside the landlady's teacup like a dormant beast. But make no mistake, it observes everything. It remembers who settled and who fabricated, and it never forgets a missed Friday. You tuck your rent beneath your pillow that night, just in case. It's Sunday afternoon when you first experience the boarding house's most sacred, stressful tradition, rent day. You wake to a strange stillness in the structure, not silence, precisely, but the absence of all the customary sounds. No boots stomping on the stairwell, no coughing through partitions, not even the landlady's kettle screaming its usual morning threats. It's a variety of stillness that makes the atmosphere feel denser, as if everyone's breathing just a little more deliberately. Rent isn't technically due until evening, but the anxiety begins early. You can discern because tenants begin to act peculiar. Mr. Pierce is suddenly dressed like he's attending church. Miss Featherby has tied a ribbon in her hair and is offering to distribute her one slice of pie, which is unprecedented. Even the tailor, the one who usually mutters to himself in 3 languages, is standing unusually motionless in the corridor, holding a coin purse as if it might evaporate. You, on the other hand, are prepared, or at least you hope you are. You reach beneath your pillow to retrieve the 7 shillings you tucked away all week like it was treasure. The coins are still there, thankfully untouched by rodents, hands, or gravity. You count them twice, 7 solid clinking truths. You smooth them out in your palm and wonder if you should polish them just in case. By 4 o'clock, a subtle ritual commences. Tenants begin drifting one by one down the corridor and toward the parlour where Mrs. Timp holds court behind her infamous ledger. The entrance stays open just enough to remind everyone this isn't really confidential. There's no line, no appointments, just a shared comprehension that you don't want to be final or too early or too desperate. You wait until 5, not too eager, not too delayed, perfectly average. As you step into the parlour, the familiar scent of scorched coal and aged upholstery welcomes you. Mrs. Timp doesn't look up. Her eyes are on her ledger, her hands calmly flipping pages like an oracle weighing destinies. A small teacup, chipped but somehow regal, rests near her right elbow. Inside it, what appears to be a single digestive biscuit floating in cold tea. She finally speaks. Quarters number. 7, you state. Identity. You provide it. She nods, slowly scribbles something with her ink nib pen, and then stops. She looks up. Just a fraction, you intending to remain the month. You hesitate, if it's acceptable. Nothing to do with acceptable, just need to know if I should begin airing out quarters 3. She gestures vaguely toward the ceiling or possibly the rodents within it. You extend your hand and position the coins gently on the table. She doesn't count them, just absorbs the sound they make as they land. Silent type, she declares. We'll observe. That's it. No receipt, no gratitude, no indication your financial sacrifice meant anything at all. You're dismissed with a flick of a pen. Back in the corridor, you breathe again. Behind you, the next tenant is already stepping forward. You don't look back. It's unfortunate luck to meet the gaze of the person behind you in the rent line. It's like catching a glimpse of your financial phantom. And it's not just about the currency. Rent day is about hierarchy. Settling punctually keeps you off the landlady's mental register. It earns you invisible privileges, an extra utensil in the kitchen, a dry towel on bath day, maybe even the benefit of the doubt if something goes missing. But Miss Rent and you become that lodger, the one people side-eye, the one whose tea always tastes faintly of someone else's resentment, the one who finds their socks damp for no apparent reason. Later that night, you'll hear the late settlers make their quiet trips to the parlour. Some slip coins onto the table like it's an offering. Others attempt jokes. One even plays the violin outside her entrance all evening in a transparent attempt at charm. None of it matters. Rent is rent, and the ledger absorbs. Once rent day passes, the entire structure exhales. The tension lifts. Not gone, just tucked away like a scarf you'll need again shortly. There's a strange peace that settles in after the coins have changed hands and the ledger is sealed. Even the floorboards seem to protest more gently. You head down to the kitchen that evening and find a few of the tenants lingering in rare good spirits. Mr. Pierce is humming something that might be a hymn or might just be his indigestion. Miss Featherby has pulled out her knitting again, having clearly decided she's permitted to be observed doing leisure now that her rent's settled. And on the distant end of the table, staring into a steaming bowl of soup as if it might reveal the secrets of the universe, is the fellow everyone calls Gunner. Nobody knows why he wears a bowler hat indoors and only consumes things that have been boiled within an inch of their existence. The fellow barely speaks, but rumour has it he once settled 2 weeks' rent in advance. That alone makes him royalty. You pour yourself a mug of watery broth and claim the empty stool near the pane. The parlour lamp flickers as usual, casting a warm, uneven glow that makes everyone look a little like phantoms from a foggy memory. And that's when you notice the genuine ritual of rent day. The exchange. Not currency anymore. Now it's assistance. Mr. Haxby is quietly offering to repair a pair of trousers for Miss Dooley, who miraculously has a few extra tea leaves. She pretends not to care, but you observe the way she eyes the stitches in her hem. Upstairs, someone knocks 3 times on the partition. You don't know the code yet, but you will. Everything in this structure has a rhythm, and if you're fortunate, you'll learn the beat before you trip over it. Later that evening, you spot Mrs. Timp in a rare moment of stillness. She's sitting isolated in the parlour, the ledger sealed beside her, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. In her lap is a small embroidery hoop, just a circle of linen with a few red flowers beginning to bloom. The moment she observes you looking, she tucks it away like a secret. She gestures toward the fire. Well, don't just hover. Sit. Might as well enjoy your quarters still being yours. You sit. The chair protests dramatically under you but doesn't collapse. That's a victory. She doesn't speak for a while, just sips from her mug and stares at the fire like it owes her something. Then she declares almost absent-mindedly, "You keep your rent settled and this structure'll treat you fair enough. You fall delayed." Well, quarters have a way of remembering. You want to inquire what she signifies, but her gaze narrows slightly and you decide it's best to nod, as if you comprehend. You will soon enough. She rises, dusts off her skirt, and mutters something about jam being missing again. She leaves you with the fire and the quiet tick of the wall clock, which somehow runs 5 minutes delayed on every day except rent day. You head back to your quarters that night with a full belly and a fresh awareness. In this structure, rent is only part of the narrative. Survival isn't just about shillings. It's about timing, alliances, reputation, and never leaving your best boots where someone else can reach them. As you settle into bed, you hear the muffled thump of someone attempting to quietly move furniture next door. They fail. You smile into the pillow. The storm of rent day has passed until next week. It's your 4th morning in the boarding house and the tea has finally betrayed you. You take one hopeful sip from the shared vessel in the kitchen and nearly gag. Someone, probably Mr. Haxby, has brewed it with last week's leaves, a dash of coal residue, and what might be pickle water. You set the portion down carefully, like it's a suspicious animal, and decide today's breakfast will be bread. Stale, dry, ambiguously beige bread. But today, you're not here for the nourishment. You're here to learn the structure, and more importantly, the souls in it. And the only way to accomplish that is the morning drift. Every morning, just after the landlady completes her first kettle and before the postman arrives, the tenants shuffle into view. Not all at once, it's more of a parade, slow, uneven, and mildly alarming. First comes Miss Dooley, mid-40s, always in lavender, with sleeves that flap when she gestures, which is constantly. She teaches piano somewhere, or at least claims she does, though nobody's ever heard her play. She talks like every sentence is a secret she's pretending not to distribute, and she's always clutching a paper cone of sugared almonds, which she guards more closely than her coin purse. Then there's Mr. Haxby, silent, wiry, always a little damp. Nobody knows where he goes during the day, but he returns smelling like a combination of fish and ink, and always with a fresh rip in his coat that he patches himself in the stairwell. You're halfway through your slice of brick bread when the entrance slams, and in comes Franny, the loudest tenant on record. "Move your knees, Clark," she barks at you, waving a carpet bag like a weapon. "I need tea. Proper tea, not whatever this is." She points at the vessel. It smells like feet. She plops down in the chair across from you and begins unpacking the carpet bag. Out comes a jar of jam, a utensil, and bizarrely a pair of maracas. She doesn't explain. You don't inquire. Franny labours at the music hall. She claims she's a singer, but most of her tales involve her being ejected from establishments rather than performing in them. She has a voice like sandpaper and the posture of a queen who's just won a fist fight. Across the quarters, Gunnar reads his newspaper upside down. You decide not to comment. Suddenly the front entrance creaks and a figure steps inside. You don't recognise him, tall, pale moustache like a regret. He carries a briefcase and walks like someone who's attempting to convince the floorboards they won't betray him. Everyone in the quarters stills. Not out of fear, just calculation. A fresh lodger is like a fresh species introduced into a fragile ecosystem. Will he be loud, generous, clean, worse? Will he borrow tea? Mrs. Timp follows close behind, ledger in hand. She pauses in the doorway. "This is Mr. Lockwell, quarters 2, no questions." And just like that, he exists. Franny raises an eyebrow, no questions. What is he? Royalty, a chimney sweep in hiding. Mrs. Timp doesn't respond. She never does when she's declared something unchallengeable. The ledger seals with a snap and she vanishes into the corridor like a disapproving breeze. You exchange glances with Franny, who grins like a cat that smelled a future scandal. I give him 3 days before he requests to borrow sugar and winds up with a lecture on soap, she mutters. The structure has spoken. Fresh lodgers are evaluated not on their identities, but on the sounds they make in the night, how they treat the communal soap container, and whether they know how to refill the kettle. You know this now. You didn't when you arrived. But things are shifting. You're not the fresh one anymore. Now you're something worse. You're part of the furniture. You rapidly discover that being part of the furniture doesn't mean comfort. It means visibility. You're now someone's soul's trust, just enough to request favours from, but not quite enough to respect your time. A dangerous middle ground. Take Miss Featherby, for example, a thin, fluttery woman who always wears a hat indoors because, as she once explained, the ceiling paint doesn't agree with my constitution. She's requested you, without blinking, if you might carry her chamber pot downstairs because her wrists are delicate and morally opposed to porcelain. You did it because refusing in a boarding house creates tension that reverberates through partitions. Or Gunnar, the hat-wearing mystery fellow who now nods at you each morning and slides over the newspaper, still upside down. But it's a gesture, and in this structure, gestures are currency. Then there's the snoring. It commences at precisely 9:17 p.m. every night and rattles the floorboards like a phantom dragging tin buckets across the attic. You attempt to trace it through the partitions, down the corridor, around the corner. You're fairly certain it's Mr. Pierce, but there's no proof, and accusing someone of snoring is considered poor form. So instead you begin stuffing wool into your ears and imagining revenge that never comes. Every tenant has a narrative. Not a dramatic one. Those are too suspicious. A decent boarding house narrative is vague, rootless, something like "I came to London for labour," or "My sister used to reside near Kensington," or "I was briefly in haberdashery, but I don't like to discuss it." Souls here construct their existences out of unfinished sentences. You catch one from Franny one night over overboiled potatoes. "I nearly married once," she declares casually. Then silence. You wait. She takes another bite and shifts the subject. Nobody presses. You learn not to. There's a comprehension here. The more someone volunteers about themselves, the less you can trust it. Instead, you bond over safer topics. The mildew, the tea, the rodent that may or may not be imaginary but is called Norman. Either way, you discuss weather and socks and which brand of starch ruins collars the slowest. One afternoon you find yourself sitting on the front steps with Mr. Haxby, watching smoke drift over the rooftops. He offers you a licorice root. You accept, chew it like you've done it before, and declare nothing. He eventually declares, "You know the partitions here, not made of plaster. Mostly newspaper from the war years." You nod. It explains a lot. The sound travels too well, and when it rains, the partitions sweat ink. He continues, "That's why the structure remembers things." You want to inquire what he signifies, but his gaze has drifted off toward the chimney across the road. There's a camaraderie here, a quiet pact. Not friendship exactly, but co-survival. You don't trust each other with secrets. You trust each other with little things. Guarding a seat by the fire, distributing news of a tea sale, warning when Mrs. Timp is in a mood. You assist Franny lift her bag upstairs one night. In return, she offers you a pair of gloves that may or may not have belonged to a baroness. You accept them. You don't inquire. One evening, you hear a violin playing in quarters 5. Badly, painfully. You pause outside the entrance for a moment before moving on. Nobody complains. That's the regulation. Everyone gets one vice, as long as it doesn't leak. And as the days pass, you grasp the structure is shaping you, teaching you how to exist small, speak quietly, hold on to warmth without clinging to it. In here, solitude is a performance, and silence is the language of politeness. You're not the newest anymore, but you're also not settled, not secure. You're floating like everyone else. And in this structure, floating is the closest thing to peace. You finally comprehend why they call the attic the slant. Not as a nickname. It's not even stated aloud, really. It's the way souls glance up when you declare you reside in quarters 7. The flicker of sympathy, the tiny pause before someone offers you a second spoonful of stew. Because everyone knows the attic isn't just elevated. It's tilted, physically and spiritually. And it's where they stick the fresh, the poor, and the easily disregarded. You reside at an angle now. The bed leans left, so you wedge a broom handle underneath one leg just to keep from sliding off in the night. The wardrobe entrance won't stay sealed unless you jam a fork into the crack, and the floorboards protest even when nobody is walking, or at least that's what you inform yourself. But none of that is the worst part. No, the genuine hardship is the ceiling. The room's ceiling is angled low on one side, forcing you to duck, yet it vaults so high on the other that it brings to mind a church designed for someone who's disappointed the preacher. By the 5th day you decide to improve your space. Your first move is to adjust the furniture. The cot is pushed into the corner diagonally. The chair is placed under the window. The wardrobe is moved entirely, though it leaves behind 4 perfectly shaped, grimy outlines on the floor where it used to stand. This small exertion grants you a rush of power for exactly 3 minutes. Then the radiator pipe in the wall begins to let out a sibilant sound. You press your ear closer. It's not just steam, it's people talking. Someone is murmuring, muffled and indistinct, but certainly real. You cannot distinguish the speech, only the mood, could be irritation or perhaps affection. It's difficult to tell in a century-old rooming house. You lean your ear against the partition and suddenly catch a very clear remark. "And he still owes me for those sausages." Ah, affection, not so much. The wall's secrets are endless. The man 2 rooms away sleeps with his boots on. The woman below you sings in French when she believes she is unobserved. And someone owns a small wind-up musical toy. They play it precisely at 3 minutes past 8 every night. You can't decide if it's meant to be comforting or unsettling. You try tapping once on the dividing wall just to observe the reaction. Silence. The next morning, your chair has shifted 1 inch to the left. Just a coincidence? Maybe. But you leave a slice of bread on the windowsill just in case the house is testing you. It vanishes within the hour. Could have been a foul. Could have been something more. You choose not to investigate further. That evening you open your small trunk only to find your soap case is gone. You are certain you stored it inside your extra shirt, yet it has disappeared. You search underneath the bed, inside your single decent shoe, even behind the peeling wall covering near the tap. Nothing. You don't mention it to anyone, because that is another unspoken rule. If an object disappears and it's not cash or a person, it is wiser to assume you simply misplaced it. You substitute a bar of coal soap into a small tin of preserved fish instead. It barely fits. The scent of sweet lavender now competes with the smell of brine. That night, the window fogs up from the inside, as it always does. You try to trace a round shape in the mist, but the glass is too oily. It leaves a long streak that resembles a question mark. You lie on your pallet and look up at the cracked wooden beam on the ceiling. It makes a groaning noise now and then, but the sounds are becoming familiar. In fact, everything in the room's lean is starting to feel known. The shedding wallpaper has a pattern to its tears. The wooden floor groans exactly once when you step into the farthest corner, and the narrow light that slips through the gap in the window frame hits your blanket like a focused light. Even without a lamp nearby, it's still tilted, still peculiar. But it's starting to feel somewhat like your own. The next morning, you wake up crooked, sore, and strangely accepting, at least until you turn over and your work boot, still wedged against the door, tumbles with a low thud that seems much too loud for such a small item. It reverberates down the stairwell like a cannon blast, followed by the unmistakable cough of Mr. Pierce 2 floors below. Congratulations. You are now a part of the morning routine. You stretch, gaze intently through the curved attic window and see 2 pigeons on the adjacent rooftop, locked in what looks like a struggle over a long ribbon. One of them prevails. The defeated one stares directly at you for several long seconds before taking flight, as if to transmit the thought, your turn next. And so your day commences. First stop, the basin. Now, this is not a true washing fixture. It is a porcelain bowl with a crack on a shaking stand, filled not by plumbing but by the metal jug you replenish from the faucet 2 stories down. The tap, as usual, screeches when turned, spits up a few muddy bubbles, then finally dispenses water that is either glacial or morally opposed to being clean. You pour some into the ceramic bowl. It drips. Not substantially, just enough to soak your thin socks, which you placed precisely too near to the sill. The boarding house located behind yours, only visible if you press your brow to the glass and peer, is a near copy of your dwelling. Same smokestack, same sloping roof, same faint strings of garments hung like flags of truce. You briefly make eye contact with someone in their own top-floor box across the narrow alley. You both incline your head. The attic dweller's silent pact is a reality. That afternoon you decide to check the structural stability of the floor. Not in the falling through kind of way, you're not quite that daring, but in the how bad is this angle really? Way. You position an apple on one end of the room and watch it roll gently, relentlessly, in a perfect curve until it bumps into your chair. You attempt the same thing with a small coin. It doesn't stop, just continues rolling in slow spirals until it disappears under a crack in the floorboards. You accept this offering and whisper a quick goodbye. Later, in the main corridor, you run into Franny. She gives you a look that suggests you appear like someone who's been testing physics in an uninsulated room. You remain silent. She gives a brief nod. It is sufficient. You pass Mr. Haxby, who is measuring something on the main railing with a piece of twine. You inquire what he is doing. Checking the incline, he responds, "Of the rail." "No," he whispers. "Of destiny." You nod seriously and proceed. By the evening, the house's lean has truly begun to feel like your possession. You have learned how to brace yourself while seated, how to position your mattress so you don't slip, how to place your cup on the window ledge with a pad made from last week's newspaper. Because level surfaces are a fable up here. You even start to enjoy the various sounds. That one rafter creak just before supper, the pipe hiss right before the toilet is flushed, the unexpected tap at 2 o'clock in the morning that no one ever brings up. They are not precisely comforting, but they are predictable. And in a lodging house such as this one, predictability is the highest form of luxury. As you settle into your cot, wrapped in two mismatched coverings and a coat you are pretending is a blanket, you listen to the house exhale all around you. You truly believe it sighs like it is adjusting to your mass, accepting your presence. Tomorrow will bring more drips, more low talk, more coal that isn't actual coal. But for this night, in this off-kilter little chamber high above the city, you feel oddly calm, tipped but steady. There is a specific kind of conflict that occurs every night in the boarding house. It does not involve yelling or hitting or even disagreements, although those certainly happen too at their own time. No, this contest is fought using elbows, beverage cups, and very precise pillow placement. It is the fight for the warm chair in the public sitting area, and this evening you have decided it is your turn to win. The sitting area itself is a narrow space squeezed between the front entry and the cooking area, illuminated by a single wall fixture that flickers as if it is reluctant to be involved. A coal fire sputters in the grate. If you can properly call it a fire, it is more of a modest smoke, maintained with strips of yesterday's news and a single log that never genuinely burns but rests there looking valuable. There are 3 seats. One, a stiff-backed monstrosity with a sharp piece in the armrest that has snagged the sleeves of 2 different coats, and one poor knitter, that one is perpetually vacant. 2, a type of overstuffed cushion that leans slightly when you sit, made to ensure your knees rise uncomfortably close to your chin. Franny prefers this one. She claims it improves her circulation dramatically. And 3, the chair. The one positioned close to the fire, the one with the armrests worn smooth by generations of nervous occupants. The one with the cushion just thick enough to imply comfort, but not so thick as to suggest extravagance. It smells faintly of baked bread and old wool. It is, quite simply, the most sought-after piece of furniture in the entire structure, and you want to sit in it. You calculate your arrival time carefully. Too early and you appear frantic. Too late and it is occupied. There is a precise moment between appearing to casually walk through and actively lying in wait. You descend the staircase with the practiced poise of someone who absolutely did not just tiptoe across groaning floorboards like a thief. As you enter the sitting area, you see it. Empty, magnificent. You quicken your step slightly, just a fraction, then motion. Miss Dooley appears from the corner by the kitchen, clutching her embroidery and setting her sights on the same prize. Her gaze narrows. Your gaze narrows. There is a second of absolute quiet, then she deliberately drops her sewing thimble. It is a deliberate distraction. You recognize it as a distraction. You do not stop moving. You slide into the chair as if it were custom-made for you. The seat cushion makes a weary sound under your weight, and the fireplace gives a low, approving rumble. Ms. Dooley lets out an exaggerated sigh and throws herself onto the cushioned seat with such force it nearly tips over. Victory. You are only permitted about 10 seconds to savour it, however, before Franny enters and announces, "Well, someone's feeling daring tonight." You nod seriously, as if occupying this seat is a civic necessity. She settles down beside you, takes out a tin of hard candies and offers you one. "They taste faintly of soap," she says, "but the kind that costs more." You accept it. It does in fact taste like soap. Mr. Haxby shuffles in next, his arms full of what appears to be old shoe polish containers. He does not utter a single word, just nods curtly at the fire as if they have an ongoing disagreement, then seats himself on the floor next to the hearth, legs crossed like a monk in a wool suit. The room fills up slowly. Pierce arrives, whistling a tune. Gunner walks in. Does not speak, just reads a newspaper printed upside down as is his habit. Someone's cat, no one knows who its owner is, jumps up onto the sill and settles into a round shape. You realise suddenly that this is the most social anyone in the house ever gets. The sitting area isn't just warm, it is neutral territory. No bills are discussed here, no personal favours are demanded. It is one of the only places where you can be in proximity to each other without exposing your vulnerabilities. Mrs. Timp appears briefly at the doorway, takes a sniff of the air, mutters something about the fire being wasted, and then leaves. She doesn't keep track of who's here, but you know she registers who is and who is not. You lean back slightly, just enough to feel the heat on the back of your legs. You have secured the warm chair. You have made it through another day, and for a brief, fleeting moment, it almost feels like this is where you belong. You don't get to enjoy the warm chair every single night. The next evening, Mr. Pierce is already in it, gently snoring, a newspaper rising and falling on his chest like the world's least interesting musical instrument. His boots are off, his feet are aimed directly at the heat, and there is no possible way, none, that you are getting that seat back tonight. So you settle into the stiff-backed horror instead. The splintered wood greets you like an ancient rival, jabbing just enough to remind you who has control. Across the room, Ms. Featherby is winding wool with the singular focus of someone about to deactivate a bomb. Franny is retelling a story that may or may not be true, involving a chimney cleaner, a formal dinner, and a runaway goose. Everyone listens, not because they trust her account, but because the alternative is sitting in absolute silence. And silence always encourages confessions you are not yet prepared to make. Mr. Haxby only speaks up once to observe that the coal delivery is 3 days overdue, and the quality has been diminishing since June. No one is sure what happened in June, but it is the type of vague benchmark everyone nods along with anyway. You take a slow sip of your tea, which is only faintly warm, likely strained through someone else's cloth, and allow your thoughts to drift. This is what evenings in the sitting area are actually for, not thinking too deeply, letting the minor annoyances cancel each other out. The uncomfortable chair, the weak tea, the damp socks. They are a form of constant background noise now. Then the door makes a squeaking sound. It is Mr. Lockwell, the most recent resident. He has been quiet since he moved in. Too quiet. Never joins for tea, does not sit near the fire, always carries a small leather briefcase and wears gloves, even inside the house. No one is certain what his profession is, but Franny is convinced he is either a lawyer, a fraudster, or a combination of the two. He pauses in the frame of the doorway. Every eye in the room moves toward him, just for a moment. He nods once, an awkward little twitch of his chin, and moves toward the darkest corner of the room. But then, astonishingly, he speaks. Would anyone like a baked treat? He opens his briefcase. Inside is a paper-wrapped packet, real shortbread, pristine, not burned. The room becomes completely still. Ms. Dooley quietly gasps. Even the feline looks interested. Franny recovers first. Well, she says cheerfully, someone is making a statement tonight. The biscuits are passed around like a sacred ritual. You accept one and try very hard not to consume it too fast. It crumbles perfectly, richly buttery. Possibly store-bought, Ms. Featherby pronounces with genuine awe, Marks and Spencer. A collective silence falls. This small action, this tiny biscuit, has completely redefined Mr. Lockwell's standing in the house. He's no longer simply the silent, strange man in room 2. He is the biscuit man, and that designation carries with it certain privileges. Tomorrow someone will offer him the first use of the teapot. The day after that, perhaps a borrowed copy of the Illustrated London News. These are the unspoken social hierarchies of a boarding house, and you who recently secured the warm chair are quietly moved back a rung. Still, you don't mind much, because this is the other reality of shared living. You don't always achieve victory, but you are always participating in the competition. By 9 o'clock the room is dimly lit and smells of coal fumes and lemon cleaner. Someone has started to softly snore. You suspect it is Gunner. Franny's head falls back mid-sentence. Even the cat has stretched into a bizarre position that seems both dignified and injured. You stand up quietly and walk toward the upper floor. The staircase is cold again. You feel the chill in your joints. But upstairs, your slanted room is waiting for you. Your crooked room with its tilted floor, its one reliable chair, and the sound of far-off voices coming through the thin walls. You curl up in your cot, the blanket now heated by the smallest piece of coal you acquired from Miss Dooley with 2 spices and a piece of old ribbon. Tomorrow the competition will start all over again. New partnerships, new complaints, new reasons to quietly chuckle about nothing in particular. And maybe, just maybe, you will reclaim the warm chair. By your second full week in the boarding house, you start to grasp that surviving isn't primarily about physical endurance. It is about carefulness, knowing precisely when to speak and when to replace it with a cough, knowing when to offer your thoughts and when to gaze very intently at your teacup until the tense moment passes. Because here the rules are not printed out. They are whispered, they are muttered, they are simply understood, carved into the everyday flow of life like scratches on the stair railing. You learn the first rule the difficult way. Never leave any food without supervision. You come downstairs one morning to discover your loaf of bread missing. Not just a slice of your breakfast, your entire loaf. A whole loaf, neatly wrapped in paper and stored in your cupboard the night before, gone. In its place, a small note written in excessively curvy handwriting. Presumed abandoned. F. You instantly know the perpetrator, Franny. You find her in the kitchen generously spreading butter on toast like someone who has never committed a theft in her entire existence. When you raise an eyebrow at her, she simply shrugs. Old bread. It belongs to the hungry. An ancient law. You consider lodging a complaint, but you also notice that the jar of fruit preserve currently in front of her is yours, and is still mostly full. You opt for peaceful coexistence. Rule number 2. Never use the kettle unless you fully intend to refill it afterward. This rule is absolute. Someone attempted to violate it once. Mr. Pierce poured himself a full mug from a nearly empty pot and did not top up the water. The kettle was mysteriously moved to the highest shelf of the pantry. For 3 whole days no one took responsibility. Everyone silently approved. And rule number 3. Never openly accuse, only subtly hint. One morning Miss Featherby's hair comb disappears. She does not declare who stole my comb. Instead, she drifts into the sitting area and makes a sad sound. It is such a shame my hair looks so messy today. If only I still had my preferred ivory comb, the one with the small blue chip. Everyone nods with great sympathy. No comb reappears. But mysteriously, Ms. Featherby discovers a pair of cutting tools in her drawer that were not there previously. Not hers, slightly rusted. A peace offering, perhaps. You also learn the difference between borrowing and borrowing. Borrowing. Someone asks if they may take your coal bucket to the lower level, promising to return it within the hour. Borrowing. Someone gently knocks on your door, says, "You don't mind, do you?" and is gone before you have a chance to respond. You never see your favourite teaspoon again. There are also rules regarding cooking, such as you are allowed to consume someone else's jam, but only if they witness you doing it, and you comment on how bad it tastes. Franny is highly skilled at this. "Whose preserve is this?" "It's simply terrible," she will say, licking the spoon clean and reaching for a second spoonful. "Tastes like regret. It is your preserve." You simply smile. Then there is the complex matter of toilet etiquette, which is more involved than international relations between small nations. There are 2 toilet rooms, one located inside, one in the yard out back. The inside one is reserved for emergencies, late-night necessities, and residents suffering from joint issues. The outdoor one is for those who are behind on their rent or have recently scorched the morning porridge. No one states this openly, but everyone understands. You once made the error of using the indoor toilet after a questionable kettle incident. The look Mrs. Timp gave you could have stripped wallpaper. There are also specific cleaning obligations. Scrubbing day happens whenever the landlady feels the main corridor smells excessively of onion and soup-soaked socks. Usually Saturdays, sometimes entirely at random, she emerges from her quarters with a pail and a list of assigned names written on a page that seems to be repurposed from last year's gas bill. No one attempts to argue. You are handed a dirty cloth and instructed to clean the banister section, which somehow encompasses the floor, the steps, and the door frame. The cloth smells strongly of vinegar and deep sadness. Later, Franny informs you that you have been officially welcomed. You are now one of us, she says, handing you a piece of extremely hard candy. Try hard not to chip a tooth. The house's dentist is merely Mr. Pierce, with a pair of pliers. You decline the candy, but you give a small smile. You still don't fully understand all the rules, but the house is starting to trust your presence. Or at the very least, it has temporarily stopped testing you. You start to notice the unwritten rules, not only in actions, but in body language. Consider the porridge procedure, for instance. Each morning someone leaves a shared pot of cooked porridge in the kitchen. No one admits to being the one who prepared it. No one actually witnesses it being made. It simply materializes, hot and slightly lumpy, resting in its iron pot like a gift from the grain deities. If you are the very first one in the kitchen, you never take the top layer. That specific layer belongs to the house itself. It is symbolic. It might be burnt. It might be blessed. Either way, it is not for your consumption. You also do not scrape the very bottom. That is considered greedy behaviour, desperate, or worse, an attempt to count how many dried fruit pieces someone else managed to get today. You arrive third. Ms. Featherby is carefully stirring with excessive caution, attempting to coax one more oat from the edge of the pot without clearly appearing to scrape it. She notices you, motions with her spoon and says, "It's mostly a memory. Now." You accept your designated portion. 1 scoop of memory. No raisins to be found, still it is warm, and that counts for something. Partway through breakfast, Gunnar appears and breaks rule number 4, no talking before drinking tea. He asks, "Has anyone seen my suspenders?" Everyone completely stops. Even the spoon in your bowl freezes mid-stir. Franny raises an eyebrow. Did they decide to leave? No one provides an answer to his question. But by the time of dinner, the suspenders are draped neatly over his doorknob. No one ever mentions them again. Then there is the peculiar situation of the community butter supply. Butter, unlike jam, is considered a shared asset, provided you never confess to consuming it. It resides in a small blue dish with a chip, which travels from the kitchen to the sitting area and sometimes even the stairs. One evening you discover it sitting on the windowsill of the second-floor landing, covered with someone's handkerchief and half melted into the wood. You do not move it. That is not your designated role. Later, it is gone. It reappears the very next day, positioned next to your tea container. No written note, just an oily circle and the subtle smell of toast. That is precisely how favours are exchanged here. Not directly, not spoken about. Bartered silently through stray crumbs and unspoken actions. Another time, you assist Miss Dooley in carrying her laundry up from the outdoor line in the garden. 5 soaking wet sheets and a mysterious sock that likely belongs to no one. The next morning, you discover your own shirt, neatly pressed and hanging from the wardrobe knob. You say absolutely nothing. You never do, because you have internalized rule number 5. Kindness must be entirely anonymous, or it quickly becomes suspicious. There is even a specific protocol for conflicts. One evening, Mr. Pierce accidentally uses Mr. Haxby's personal mug. No one utters a single word. But the next day, Pierce discovers his boots mysteriously rearranged, the left one placed where the right one should be, and the reverse, and Haxby's measuring string is mysteriously not there. 2 days later, it reappears. The mug is left on the staircase, fully clean, with a small peppermint inside. Truce is accepted. You begin to feel like the entire house is a gigantic board game, and everyone is simply moving their designated pieces quietly, sliding small coins, furtive glances, and old grievances across a floor covered in worn carpet. There are no formal declarations, just quiet coughs in the main hallway and tea-tins that either appear or vanish depending entirely on who you last shared the sitting area with. And all of this is governed not by official law, but by a sense of shared awkwardness. One morning, as you walk past Ms. Featherby's door, she opens it just a crack and whispers, "Do not use the toilet out back today. Trust me on this." You do not inquire why. You simply thank her and head upstairs. By this point, these small warnings are understood as tokens of genuine affection, because in a boarding house people do not show they appreciate you by smiling broadly. They show it by protecting your socks from strong drafts and keeping you away from outdoor toilets that have unfortunate situations. You sit down on your sloping bed that night, sipping tepid tea, and realise you are no longer simply trying to survive. You are skillfully adapting. The unwritten rules no longer feel dangerous. They feel like the choreography in a strange kind of social dance. A dance where no one leads, no one offers applause, but everyone moves in perfect synchronicity. One mistake could still send you tumbling, but you're quickly learning the precise rhythm. At the back section of the house, tucked behind the crumbling structure used for coal storage and the tilted outdoor toilet, there is a very narrow alleyway. Most people would likely not notice it, half concealed by tangled laundry lines, flanked by two large rusting metal garbage cans and smelling permanently of a potent mix of stale cabbage water and old damp flannel. But here in the boarding house, that alleyway is critically important. It is not just a faster way to reach the corner store. It is a busy trading post, a makeshift delivery service, a place for whispered confessions, a black market exchange station for those who are broke and those who are full of initiative. You discover it completely by chance on a Tuesday morning when you push open the kitchen back door, looking for a place to discard some poorly cooked porridge, and you find Mr. Haxby hunched down behind the water barrels, speaking in low, confidential tones to a man with only one glove and a wheelbarrow piled high with non-matching boots. You hesitate. Haxby looks up at you. You require footwear. You don't, strictly speaking, but now your curiosity is piqued. The man pushing the wheelbarrow tips his hat, or what is left of it, and says, 9 cents for a full pair. 7 if you do not care if the left and right foot match. Behind him, a third figure appears, a young girl no older than 16, holding a basket filled with slightly crushed metal tins, their labels completely scraped off, the contents a total mystery. She does not speak, she just gives you a challenging look that seems to ask, "Are you here to buy or to report us?" You take a step backward and hold up both your hands like you are carefully retreating from a nervous animal. "No trouble at all," you say, "just looking around." That response earns you a slight nod from the wheelbarrow man and a small grunt of acceptance from Haxby. You have been initiated. It turns out the alleyway is where the real transactions take place, because inside the house everything is strictly limited, heavily controlled and carefully rationed. But out back, that is the technical loophole, the crack in the system. Need a button urgently, there is a specific button supplier. Need oil for your lamp. Bring a small bar of soap and a friendly, open expression. Need half a pound of loose tea that smells suspiciously like dry cut grass. That will cost you one good comb and a decent story. The entire economy is highly flexible, based entirely on immediate need, personal charm, and how many old crusts of bread you can manage to spare. Franny once successfully traded 2 pickled onions and a short song for an entire roll of ribbon. She immediately tied it around her hat and declared it a tax write-off. You ask her how this entire operation functions. She leans in as if she is about to tell you where the Queen keeps her secret chocolate stash. Everyone who lives a cheap life has a secret back entrance. This particular one just happens to be located behind the bin clearly labelled "Do Not Open." Later that same week, you see the landlady herself standing at the rear gate, speaking to a man carrying a heavy sack of coal slung over one shoulder and an angry scowl that could easily crack asphalt. She hands him a small coin and something tightly wrapped in old newspaper. You briefly catch a glimpse of something white, possibly cheese, possibly just chalk. No one says a single word about it, but the next day the fire burns significantly warmer. That is simply how things work here. Even Mrs. Timp participates in the secret trade. The alleyway quickly becomes your quiet preoccupation. You start finding creative excuses to walk through it, taking out the trash more frequently than necessary, checking for potential air drafts near the outdoor toilet. You begin to recognise specific faces. Mrs. Timp's personal butcher, a young boy with a cart filled with bright yellow lemons, a silent woman who always carries feathers and never offers an explanation why. It is like discovering the second hidden level of the boarding house, an entire hidden tunnel beneath the already slanted structure. The people who genuinely succeed here are the ones who know how to expertly trade in unspoken favours, not currency. In total silence, not formal receipts. And you, a mere desk clerk, begin to learn the necessary skills. You trade a full bottle of ink for a small tin of fresh matches. You hand over a scarf that is slightly burned in exchange for 3 thin slices of questionable quality ham. You, even though you would vigorously deny it, even swap a half-written personal letter for a bar of genuine French soap, the kind that creates a satisfying foam. Back upstairs. You unwrap it with the reverence of someone examining a treasure map. It smells strongly of blooming flowers and exciting opportunity. You carefully place it inside the metal tin beneath your bed because that is another crucial rule. If something is valuable, you must hide it, especially if it smells pleasant. The alleyway slowly begins to feel like a natural extension of the house itself, only without the worn floorboards and the annoying social customs. It is the place where the residents allow their sharper, less controlled sides to show. It is where the truth leaks out just a little, like grey smoke from a stovepipe that has a crack. You learn that Gunnar once traded away his personal shaving mirror for a small pouch of tobacco. He has not seen his own reflection since the month of March. He does not seem to care at all. You learn that Miss Featherby has been slowly exchanging her mother's valuable silver buttons. One at a time for small tins of thick condensed milk. She swears she is simply saving them all for the long winter. No one pushes her for a better answer, and you learn that Mr. Lockwell, the glove-wearing, biscuit-offering mystery man from room 2, is regularly receiving strange packages out back, wrapped simply in plain paper, delivered by a man with noticeably red hair and no patience whatsoever. Sometimes the packages contain books, sometimes they make a distinct clinking sound. One time, it made a noticeable meowing sound. Franny says nothing. She simply mutters to herself. Everyone is just a temporary boarder until they evolve into something else and then wanders off to trade a shoelace for a single lemon. You try very hard not to be judgmental. You do peek, though. What surprises you the most is not the slight illegality of all these transactions, although technically most of it is against the law. It is the noticeable politeness of the entire operation. No angry shouting, no physical fights, just gentle negotiation, cautious bartering, and the occasional eye roll when someone foolishly tries to trade old, used handkerchiefs for actual fresh meat. There is even a simple trading etiquette. For example, if 2 residents want the same exact item, they flip a coin. Unless one of them has recently completed a difficult household chore, in which case they are automatically given first choice. It is not written down anywhere. It just happens automatically. One afternoon, you observe a trade so carefully executed it could easily have been a complex ballet performance. Miss Dooley desperately wants a roll of fine muslin fabric. The alley girl with the dented tins wants a bottle of perfume. Neither person has what the other needs, so Franny steps in to mediate. She offers a tiny bottle of lavender water in exchange for a spare handkerchief from Miss Dooley. She then swaps the lavender water for a bundle of matches with Haxby. Haxby gives the matches to the tin girl, who then offers up the muslin, which is finally handed to Miss Dooley. No one speaks at all during the entire exchange. At the very end, Franny makes a polite curtsy and declares, "Victorian capitalism working perfectly." You start quietly bringing small things down in your pockets. A spare metal spoon, a half bar of candle wax, a quick drawing you once made of the coal shed that someone bafflingly trades you for a whole orange. You begin to understand the real truth. The alleyway is not just where things are exchanged, it is where your personal power returns. In the confines of the house, everything is tightly controlled. In the alleyway, you get to decide what something is truly worth. You even start your own personal ritual. Every single Friday you bring a small tin of used tea leaves to the back gate and place it gently on the old wooden crate next to the large wash tub. In return, someone who remains entirely unseen leaves you a fresh scrap of soap, sometimes tied neatly with string, sometimes just sitting there with morning dew still on the edge. It is not exactly close friendship, but it is something quite near to it. One morning, when it is raining heavily, you find a pair of gloves that do not match, folded very neatly beside the tea crate. Not your gloves exactly, but your fingers are absolutely freezing. You wait for a full 10 minutes, then you take them, tucking them inside your coat as if they have always belonged there. Later that same evening, you discreetly return the favour, a small sealed envelope tucked under a nearby stone. 1 clove, 1 sugar cube. 1 single line of poetry torn from a forgotten book. No note, no identifying name. The next day, someone successfully fixes the persistent squeak in your attic room door. The alleyway does not just remember debts owed, it quietly forgives them sometimes, if you manage to play the game with skill. Back in the sitting area that night, Franny asks you, "Been lurking near the bins again, Clark?" You give a small shrug. She grins, knowingly. You have the distinct look of someone who just acquired something highly useful for absolutely nothing. You briefly glance down at your new gloves. She offers a quick wink. Everyone in the entire house has secrets, but the alleyway keeps them protected. You have walked past it every single day. The main cellar door located at the back of the ground floor hallway. It is disguised so perfectly within the wooden panelled wall that you almost completely forget its very existence. No sign, no visible doorknob, just a faint rectangular outline and a small keyhole-shaped dark shadow near the floor. But once you finally notice it, you are unable to stop noticing it. You ask Franny about it nonchalantly as you stir your tea in the sitting area one evening. She does not look up from her lap. She simply says, "Don't even think about it." Miss Featherby makes a show of not listening, but immediately starts winding her yarn twice as fast as before. Even Gunner shifts noticeably in his chair, a dramatic display of emotion for a man who has been completely oblivious to the same crossword puzzle for 3 days straight. You try a slightly different approach. What is actually down there? Just coal? Maybe some old broomsticks? Franny leans forward, lowers her voice considerably and whispers terrible plumbing and even worse decisions, which is not entirely unhelpful, but it is certainly not a straight answer. You purposefully avoid the topic for a few days, pretending you are no longer interested. Pretending you cannot hear strange, faint sounds coming from behind that wall late at night. Quiet, shuffling sounds, a rhythmic clanking noise, the occasional drawn-out theatrical sigh that travels up the stairwell like a sad ghost with acute stage fright. Another afternoon, with Mrs. Timp engaged in her routine harassment of the milkman, you pause near the end of the hallway. It is just you, the peeling wallpaper and the vague rectangular outline in the wall suggesting a door. It is not secured because it has no knob or visible lock, only a small brass loop pressed flat against the wood, designed for a direct pull, not a turn. You take a swift look around. Nothing stirs, no sound of movement. You tug. The entrance gives way. You had imagined a small flight of stairs, perhaps a stack of cleaning rags or a supply of coal. What hits you instead is an odour. Rich, damp, and slightly metallic, like a blend of cellar apples and old rust. This is the kind of smell that implies time operates differently in this space. The steps themselves are made of steep stone. You hesitate, but your sheer curiosity has overpowered any caution. You begin your descent. It is, naturally, quite dark, but the faint light from the hall is enough to distinguish shapes. There are coiled ropes, several barrels, a busted wash basin and a wooden chair that looks to have lost a fight with something much larger. You tell yourself you'll only be down here for a second, just one quick glance. Then you hear it. A distinct thump. It's not coming from above, but deeper down. It is subtle, yet undeniably present. You freeze. The sound comes again. Thump. Followed by a slow dragging, and then a faint humming. You begin to retreat slowly towards the staircase, your shoes slipping slightly on the smooth stone. You don't run. That is a rule you have just spontaneously created. Never run in a basement. It only encourages things. As you reach the doorway, you cast one final look into the pitch black below nothing. The noise has stopped. Just a silence so heavy you could put it in a jar. You ease the door shut, pressing the brass ring flush. Later that evening during the meal, no one mentions the incident, but as you reach for the salt shaker, Franny says, without glancing up, "I warned you not to." You simply nod. She passes the salt anyway. The next morning, the hallway has been scoured entirely clean, a little too immaculate, suggesting an effort to conceal footprints. Behind the leg of the umbrella stand you discover a tiny item, a silver thimble. It is unfamiliar to you. You leave it exactly where it lies because that is the most recent lesson you've learned this week. If the house wishes to hide something, you let it. You convince yourself you are ready to forget about it. The mysterious door, the sound, the fleeting trail of dampness across the floor that appeared and vanished like steam from a coffee cup. You tell yourself it is not your concern. You even repeat the phrase to yourself, like a daily prayer, every time you walk past that particular section of wall. Not your concern, not your concern, not your concern. But the house seems to have a way of echoing the thought back. Is it? The echoes are not voices, not precisely. They manifest in the floorboards creaking a bit louder as you pass that section of wall. The brass loop seems to catch the gaslight more brightly than it should, the way no one will meet your gaze when you bring up the basement. You notice Mrs. Timp looking at you strangely the next day, not with anger or suspicion, but with a knowing caution, as if checking to see if the house had revealed too much. You remain silent. She offers the same courtesy. That night, a small tin of lavender furniture polish is left outside your door. You do not know the source, but you understand the message. Polish something, clean something, or simply forget. You scrub your shoes with intense vigour. By the following day, the entire incident is as if it never occurred. Franny is back to arguing with Ms. Dooley over whether a cooked onion qualifies as a full meal. Gunnar is seated, absorbed in a newspaper dated 3 months prior. Mr. Pierce is stitching a button back onto his vest while cursing softly in 2 different languages. And there you are, carefully making sure not to look at the wall as you walk by. You nearly succeed, almost. Then you hear it again, just a faint noise, not a bump this time, nor a drag. Just a small clink, like metal striking stone. You freeze. Halfway up the staircase. Franny is right behind you. She stops as well. Her boot heels click once, then fall silent. You say nothing. She leans a little, peering past you into the hallway, and murmurs, very quietly. Sometimes the pipes make noise. You nod, even though you both know the pipes are on the opposite side of the structure. Later, that evening in the living room, you find yourself looking toward the hallway more than once. Franny notices one instance. She sighs, places her teacup down and mutters, "You know what's behind that door." You offer no reply. She answers her own question regardless. History. She stirs her drink, then adds, and a broken laundry wringer, and probably one of Ms. Featherby's socks. There's a pause, then regret. Plenty of that too. Ms. Featherby sniffs. My socks are entirely without regret. But no one chuckles, because everyone understands the basement is more than just a room. It functions as a pressure release, a location where the house stores all that it cannot openly manage. Old financial ledgers, forgotten travel trunks, spoiled fruit, and secrets too inconvenient to address are kept down there. You suddenly wonder if all boarding houses have these kinds of spaces, secret basements, hidden passages, panels in the wall where excess emotion is swept aside. Just as the attic accumulates dust, the cellar stockpiles memory, and sometimes that memory seeps out. You do not go back, but the door remains. It waits, and so you wait too. That night, as you drift off in your small, sloping attic bed, the wind howls through the fractured window pane. A stair creaks somewhere. When you know no one is actually walking, you pull the bedding higher and whisper into the darkness. Not tonight. It starts, as most disruptions in the boarding house do, with a subtle odour and a wet floor. You descend the stairs on a Wednesday morning looking for tea, and instead find Mr. Pierce at the bottom landing, one boot soaking in what you hope is only soapy water. He lifts his foot, examines the dripping sole, and mutters, "Well, the privies burst again. This is not the first occurrence. It will certainly not be the last." The shared outhouse, a flimsy wooden structure tucked into a small nook off the back stairs, is maintained through sheer desperation and a strict hands-off policy. Everyone uses it, no one takes ownership, and the only person who ever attempts to mend it is Mr. Haxby, who once described the chore as deeply humbling. Mrs. Timp is already in the kitchen when you arrive, apron tied, broom in hand. She bypasses a greeting. She simply gestures with the broom toward a split bucket by the entrance and says, "Cleaning day arrived early. You want to protest, but the puddle is expanding." Tenants gather in the hall, clutching cleaning rags, various buckets, and the particular quiet resentment that arises when everyone knows they are about to clean up a mess no one caused but everyone contributed to. Franny dramatically rolls up her sleeves. "Well, should we collectively dive into madness?" Miss Featherby arrives last, wearing a sun hat and an expression of deep spiritual distress. "I suggest," she says, "we all pray the eel has not returned." You blink. "What eel?" "Long story," Franny says. "Short eel." And no one offers further explanation. You are assigned mopping duty. Mr. Haxby takes on the physical task, actually plunging into the structure to investigate the inner workings. The rest of you fall into a predictable pattern. Scrub, rinse, wring. There is something strangely unifying about this shared hardship. Pierce sings a slow sea shanty to himself. Gunner hums along quietly. Even Miss Dooley offers to clean the doorknob, though no one believes her. She touches it often enough to be accountable. Franny, meanwhile, oversees the effort with the authority of a military general and the stance of a produce seller. "The corners, Clark. You missed the corners. That is where all the sorrow accumulates." Mr. Haxby re-emerges, hair damp, boots saturated, holding a rusty section of pipe with an expression of intense betrayal. "Someone flushed a hairbrush," he announces grimly. Franny gasps. Not the expensive tortoiseshell one. He nods solemnly. There is a moment of silence, then Mrs. Timp appears, wiping her hands on a piece of cloth that might have once been white. Her voice is low, monotone. "Who?" she asks. "Who flushed a grooming tool?" Everyone's eyes drift toward Miss Featherby. Miss Featherby stands tall. "It fell," she says. Mrs. Timp stares, unblinking. "Did it fall on its own, or did you throw it, Featherby?" Featherby pauses. Then, with a trace of pride, "It had slighted me." No one disputes this. The cleaning continues. You learn some new things during this ordeal. For instance, The walls of the privy are lined with old newspapers, which have bonded over time into something that is neither quite wall nor quite paper, and behind the wooden panelling someone once carved a series of tally marks next to the words January Woe. You decide not to ask. By midday the smell has diminished from a punishment to merely a regret. Buckets are emptied, rags are wrung out, socks are given up for lost. You sit on the back porch step, taking in the slightly cleaner air, and observe your housemates. Sweaty, damp, covered in unknown stains, and you realise this is the true essence of community. Not happy faces around a piano, not polite small talk over desserts, but a collection of overworked, underpaid people scrubbing grime together and silently passing the soap. No one cheers when the last bucket is tipped out. There is no celebration, but Franny pats your shoulder and says you mop like a person who has experienced deep trauma. That is meant as a compliment. You nod because you somehow know that it is. The house is quieter following the privy disaster, not a restful silence, but more of a shared understanding that we have all witnessed too much, the kind of stillness that settles over a group who have, for better or worse, faced something elemental, something soaking wet. Everyone now moves, with slightly more care. Even the stairs seem to creak more softly, as if they too are attempting to forget. You notice a new respect for you in the hallway. Franny offers you the first cup of tea from the pot. Mr. Pierce allows you to pass him on the stairs without a word. Even Mrs. Timp gives a single nod as she hands you your rent slip. No verbal communication, just the smallest hint of recognition. This is not heroism. It is simply survival, and in this house that is highly valued. Later that evening, the living room returns to its usual sounds, chairs groaning, spoons tapping against chipped porcelain, and the distant hint of someone burning toast again. Mr. Haxby is airing a collection of socks next to the fireplace. No one asks about their previous location. No one wants to know. You settle into the firm chair, carefully avoiding the exposed wood splinter, and try to ignore the smell that seems permanently embedded in your shirt cuffs. Franny is already midway through a story. Something involving a feather scarf, a taxi driver, and a confusion over a rented dog. You let the words wash over you like soap that barely produces suds. Then the subject smoothly changes, as it always does, to the outhouse itself. Did anyone ever figure out who drew those faces on the inside of the door? Ms. Dooley asks, delicately dabbing her tea. Gunner grunts. They have been there since '82. They blinked at me, Featherby says without a hint of humour. No one questions her. Franny adds, well, it's certainly better than the time that mouse took up residence inside the toilet paper holder. There was a toilet paper holder, you ask, surprised. There used to be, Franny says, until the landlady declared it an unnecessary luxury and repurposed it to hold spools of thread. You laugh. They all do. And just like that, the strain of the morning begins to dissipate, because in the boarding house, disaster is never definitive. It is just another layer of shared inconvenience, tucked into the wallpaper, hidden behind the stove, wedged into the plumbing like a swallowed comb. The next day you wake to find a small bunch of lavender flowers tucked into your doorknob. No note, just the fragrance. You suspect Miss Featherby, perhaps as an apology or possibly a warning. Downstairs, the hallway faintly smells of lemon and vinegar, Mrs. Timp's trademark floor cleaning mixture, a scent known for stripping away wax and self-respect. The bucket is still sitting next to the stairs. Inside it floats the infamous hairbrush, now perfectly clean and resting like a salvaged relic, awaiting some kind of honour. No one claims it. Later, you assist Mr. Haxby with fixing the tilted towel hook near the kitchen sink. Neither of you talks much, just a few nails, a few shared glances, a mutual understanding that things break, things get blocked, and people will inevitably flush things that should never be flushed. Before sleeping, you sit at your attic window and listen to the house's nightly sounds. Whistling from the kettle, footsteps, laughter in the distance, the occasional thud of someone falling over the cat. You are exhausted, aching in new and unexpected ways. Your boots faintly smell of ammonia and something vaguely like remorse. But the house feels, if not absolutely clean, then at least cleared out, spiritually aired. You climb into your crooked bed with slightly damp sleeves and a quiet mind. You fall into a deep sleep. No dreams, just the comforting weight of a task completed, a mess survived, and a moment earned. It starts with a simple cough, not yours, not this time around. It originates down the hall, 3 dry, sharp barks in the darkness, right after the gas lights have been dimmed, and the last kettle has given its final wheezing whistle. You hear it clearly from your attic room, the sound muffled by 2 layers of wallpaper and sloping floorboards, but it slices through the silence like a rusty hinge. It happens again the following night. This time someone else hears it too. In the morning the kitchen is strangely subdued. Mr. Pierce sips his tea with a worried scowl, and Miss Featherby holds her scarf tighter around her neck. Even though the fire is unusually warm, no one speaks of the sound. No one needs to. In a residence like this, sickness spreads faster than gossip. All it takes is one single cough, one shared spoon, one moment of forgetting, like using someone else's ladle for your oatmeal, and suddenly the entire household is speaking in hushed tones and washing their mugs twice. Franny, naturally, is the first to address it openly. At breakfast, she declares, "If anyone here infects me, I will retaliate with opera and cooked onions." No one disputes her. The threat is genuine. By the 3rd day, there are 3 distinct coughs, one of which sounds wet. You do not know the source, and you do not wish to know. Miss Dooley is seen carrying a bundle of eucalyptus wrapped in a handkerchief, muttering about drawing out the bad vapours. Mr. Haxby sharpens a pencil and starts making small chalk marks on the hallway wall, one for every cough he hears. He claims it is for tracking. Franny claims it is for dramatic effect. And Mrs. Timp? She simply posts a small notice outside. The cups are not friends. Wash them twice. That is all. No speeches, no elaborate reasoning. Just the simple reality of shared items in a crowded space during what is becoming a small outbreak. You try your best to maintain distance. You boil your tea for a longer time. You wipe down your doorknob with a vinegar-soaked cloth. You even stop using the communal sugar container, which now appears to be the centre of the danger, sitting there innocently with its half-used spoon and its coating of questionable fingerprints. But boarding houses are not designed for isolation, neither in their physical layout nor their social structure. The stairwells are narrow, the windows are sealed shut, linens are passed around more often than anyone will admit, and the kettle, that sacred heavily used kettle, is touched by every single hand in the house, at least twice a day. You find yourself observing your housemates as if they are characters in a mystery novel. Who is sniffing? Who is sneezing? Who is quietly licking their fingers before turning a page? You start holding your breath whenever you are in the hallway. Franny, always innovative, begins wearing gloves indoors. Why? You ask. She holds up a hand. Style, she says. And also, I refuse to die because Pierce refuses to cover his mouth. Pierce scowls. It is allergies. Of course it is, she retorts. We are all allergic to your manners. Even Miss Featherby, usually too delicate for open conflict, begins dusting camphor onto the stair banister. It smells like old medicine and a forgotten pharmacy. But the coughing persists, not constantly, just enough to keep everyone on edge. You lie awake at night, listening for the pattern. 3 small taps, 1 rasping sound. A sigh. You imagine the germs sliding through the wallpaper, like smoke curling through keyholes, sinking into the wool blankets. And worst of all, you feel the faint irritation in your own throat. You cough just 1 time, then bolt upright, staring into the dark. Appalled, you say out loud to the empty room, "It is just dust." It is, most likely. But now you are part of the problem. You pull the blanket up over your nose and sleep awkwardly huddled in the corner, away from the door, away from the air current, praying no one heard you. Because in this house, a cough is not just a noise, it is a personal statement. By morning, it is not simply coughing anymore. Now there is sniffing and sneezing. One particularly terrible noise came from behind Miss Dooley's door that sounded like someone attempting to yodel into a teacup. The boarding house is unsettled, not quite fully sick, not yet, but leaning heavily towards it like your attic floor, always just inches from collapse. Mrs. Timp is sensible. She imposes new rules. The kettle must only be used once per person, per boil. All mugs must be personally marked. A bit of string, a smudge of wax, a fingerprint in jam, anything to establish who has touched what. And the sugar container? Gone. Concealed, possibly buried deep outside. Ms. Featherby is the first to appear with her own personal spoon, which she carries concealed in her sleeve like a weapon. It is marked with a tiny goose engraving and has a peculiar notch carved along the handle. She claims it belonged to her grandmother. You suspect it was recently acquired from a dessert shop. Franny adopts a defence strategy of strong fragrance. She dabs lavender oil on her scarf, on the doorknob, and accidentally on your coat. "Smell that," she says. "That is the scent of my survival." Even Gunnar begins wearing a scarf indoors, which causes a brief moment of panic, as no one has ever seen him accessorise before. When asked, he mutters something vague about air movement and returns to staring at his inverted newspaper. You, meanwhile, try to remain inconspicuous. You smile gently, avoid the kettle when others are present, and hum quietly while making toast as a way to signal, "I am calm, I am clean, I am not the source." But the fear is contagious. Every sneeze becomes a public incident. Every groan is a reason for banishment. One afternoon you pass Mr. Pierce on the stairwell. He appears pale. You nod politely. He claims it is simply the changing weather. You both know better. You hear him coughing into a towel later that day. He is attempting to be discreet, but the walls are thin, and shame carries a louder sound than sickness. That night, a strange package materialises in the hallway. A bottle of cough medicine labelled Lochner's lung oil for the delicate and the doomed. No one claims it. No one touches it. It vanishes. By morning, the living room is even quieter. No one shares food now. Everyone carries their own mug, their own tea bags, their own little spoon tucked into a pocket like a loaded gun. Conversations shift from everyday gossip to discussions of defensive tactics. Lemon in the water is helpful, Miss Featherby advises. Whiskey in the lemon is even better, Franny counters. I simply try to breathe less, Haxby offers, entirely seriously. But despite the tension, there remains a form of solidarity in it. Not genuine warmth, but more like the silent cooperation among passengers on a sinking boat who are all bailing water. Shared misfortune is the ultimate leveller, and few things bring people together faster than the desperate need not to be the person blamed for the illness. Even Mrs. Timp shows a slight softening. She places a folded blanket in the hallway for anyone to borrow. No one uses it, of course, but the small gesture is noted. She also begins boiling something on the stove. It smells like onions and a broken promise. When questioned, she merely says steam is good for you and walks away. Franny refers to it only as the soup that judges you. And then, just as quickly, the coughing subsides. The sneezing disappears. People stop giving each other suspicious side glances on the stairwell. Pierce begins wearing his outdoor shoes inside again, a clear sign of his recovered ego. Ms. Dooley hums an off-key tune. In the living room, the sugar container quietly reappears, its lid sticky with general forgiveness. By the weekend, the house has largely returned to normal. No one declares victory, no one offers high fives, but the shared mugs are back. The chairs are drawn closer together, and someone leaves a note next to the kettle. We survived. Barely. Try not to breathe on anyone. For fun, you add a line underneath. Or for payback, Franny adds, unless they stole your jam. The house does not laugh out loud, but it relaxes, and in this boarding house, that is the closest thing to real happiness. It begins with an odour, not an unusual event in the boarding house. Most hallways carry a background scent of boiled wool and various personal ambitions, but this one is distinct, stronger, sharper, like a mix of mothballs and something briefly scorched. You are halfway down the stairs when you notice it, and you are not alone. Franny is already on the second-floor landing, sniffing the air dramatically. It smells like someone overcooked a necktie. You turn the corner and see the door to room 4, the one situated between Ms. Dooley and Gunner. The door is wide open, and the room is empty. Not just the tenant out for the day, truly empty. The bed is stripped down, the wash basin is completely dry. The single rickety chair has been turned over and placed against the wall as if it has been disciplined. Even the hook where a coat once hung is bare, save for a random piece of string. There is no evidence of packing, no farewell letter, no murmured goodbyes. Simply gone. The rest of the residents slowly gather, each with their own degree of morbid curiosity. Miss Featherby clutches her shawl tighter. "He has left?" she asks, as if leaving is a kind of medical condition. Pierce shrugs, did not see him depart, did not hear the door close. Gunner grunts. For him, this qualifies as high drama, and Franny, peering into the barren room, voices what everyone is thinking. He was right here yesterday. Because it is true, you saw him in the hallway the night before, slightly stooped, giving a polite nod. No luggage, no moving boxes, just a man returning from somewhere with a paper-wrapped bundle under his arm and a weary expression behind his glasses. That was last night. Now, not a single trace. Mrs. Timp appears, her broom in hand. She looks at the small crowd like a shepherd observing sheep that have forgotten their basic instincts. "Well," she says, sweeping past you, "do not all crowd the area at once. It is not an exhibition." She steps into room 4, scans the emptiness and mutters, faster than usual. Someone behind you coughs, not suspiciously, but purely out of habit. Miss Dooley clears her throat. "Did he mention anything, Mrs. Timp?" "Paid up until Sunday," she says. Neat handwriting, no stated complaints. She bends down to pick up a small item from the floor. You cannot quite make out what it is. Then she slams the door shut. Click. That is that. Room 4 has turned over. This is not the first instance of this, and it will not be the last, because that is the reality of life in a boarding house. People simply disappear, not in a mysterious way, not tragically, just quietly. Sometimes they leave without any notice. Sometimes they vanish halfway through a rent cycle. Sometimes they return to their rooms one final time, pack their possessions in silence, and dissolve into the morning fog of the train schedules, their teacups still drying next to the stove. You never ask where they went. That would be seen as rude. But you do wonder. You recall small details. The way he folded his newspaper, how he never took jam but always made sure to return borrowed spoons, the subtle scent of peppermint that lingered after he passed you on the stairs. And now, all of it gone. Franny declares, "I bet it was massive debts." Featherby insists, "No, it was romantic despair. You could tell by his socks." Haxby, unusually clear-headed, comments he always looked like a man already halfway out the door. You offer no opinion. You just stand there, staring at the closed door, suddenly aware of the utter silence he has left behind. A perfect vacant space, exactly the size of one polite tenant. Later that evening, you hear the sound of hammering. You lean out your door just in time to see Mrs. Timp nailing up a new sign, "Room to Let Weekly," written in the same sharp, slanted handwriting as every other official notice in the house. The placard sways slightly as she walks away. Room 4 waits, and you realise here, emptiness is never allowed to remain empty for long. By the next morning, the sign on room 4 has vanished. No one saw who removed it, not even Franny, who typically knows everything a full day before it occurs. It is simply gone, and the door is now closed again, but this time with a new kind of sound coming from behind it. Not clear voices, not distinct footsteps, just a muted shuffling noise. You walk past it slowly once, then again. On your third pass you pause, pretending to examine a slight scratch in the wallpaper. The doorknob turns, and then, as if by chance, the door opens half an inch. Inside, a woman, in her early middle age, her hair tied back with a kind of ribbon that suggests a lost significance. She glances up just long enough to see you and not long enough to engage. You offer a small nod. She returns the gesture. The door closes. Just like that, the room has been reset. At breakfast, Franny is indignant. "I was fully intending to knock," she says, "introduce myself, offer her some jam." "No, you were not," Pierce says. Franny dismisses this. Still, it is a matter of common courtesy. You do not just sneak in like that. Ms. Featherby joins in, her voice hushed. "I heard she arrived at midnight with only one suitcase and a potted plant." "A plant?" Franny blinks. That feels threatening. Featherby mentions the excessive green. It's one of those plants that thrive even when you neglect them. "Unnatural," Franny mutters, sniffing the air. Gunnar just shrugs. She could be a witch. Nobody laughs, because in a boarding house, your standing is earned not by introductions, but by the noises you make after dark, the way you heat your water, and the scent you leave lingering in the hallway. So far, the woman in room 4 makes almost no sound at all, yet odd noises occur near her. Haxby claims the kitchen tap whistles now when you turn it too fast. Pierce insists the floorboards by her door have started creaking in rhythm. 2 steps, pause. 2 steps, pause. Like she's carefully pacing her moves, he says, eyes wide. And you pick up on something smaller, the faint smell of lemon, just a subtle hint of it floating down the hall like a polite suggestion. You don't mention it, because you're starting to understand the rules here. New tenants are like a fog. They drift in slowly, obscuring what you thought was stable, then disappear or settle in before you fully grasp what they've changed. Still, you find yourself adapting. You avoid the kettle when she's nearby. You don't hang your coat next to hers on the hall peg. You even lower your voice when you pass room 4, and you couldn't say why. Then one afternoon, she leaves her door slightly ajar. You catch sight of lace curtains, a neatly folded shawl, and a teacup resting in a saucer. It's not chipped, not mismatched. It's real porcelain. Nobody else in the house owns porcelain. By evening, the door is shut, and the next morning a single tulip has appeared in the window box that's been empty for 3 years. Bright red. Fresh, Gunnar murmurs. Weird magic. Featherby frowns. Nobody ever uses that window. Franny tilts her head. It's too cheerful for this place. Mrs. Timp, when questioned, simply says the rent is paid, and that's sufficient for her. But you can sense it. The whole atmosphere has shifted, not in a dramatic ghost story way, but in the subtle way a room feels different after someone moves your chair precisely 2 inches to the left. Nothing is technically wrong, yet everything is on alert. Room 4 doesn't just have a new renter, it has a new presence. And in this house, where presence is a form of power, where silence holds authority and curtains communicate, that changes everything. That night, lying in bed, you hear it again. The creaking floorboards. 2 steps, pause, then quiet. You smile into the darkness. The house may not speak often, but it always pays attention. There are only 2 topics in this boarding house that generate genuine argument. One is the possibility of the back stairwell being haunted, the other is romance, and today the house is buzzing with the latter. It all begins, like all the best scandals, with a spoon. At breakfast, Mr. Pierce picks up a teaspoon from the drying rack, squints at it, then declares, "This is not my spoon." Franny raises an eyebrow. "No one wants your spoon, Pierce." It has her initials on it, he says, pointing dramatically at Ms. Featherby. Featherby gasps, not out of guilt, but because she always gasps when anyone addresses her before noon. That is not my spoon, she insists, her cheeks flushing. How dare, I don't. Pierce slams the spoon down like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Everyone falls silent. Then Franny leans in, her voice thick with delight. Featherby, have you been spooning? The room bursts into laughter and coughing. Mr. Haxby nearly chokes on his tea. Gunner, who hasn't spoken since Tuesday, lets out a full snort. Featherby, utterly shocked and embarrassed, mutters something about spiritual intimacy and rushes out of the kitchen. Franny wipes a tear from her eye. I haven't had that much fun since the coal man fell into the wash tub, but the damage is done. Now the house is scrutinising. Everyone is suddenly a suspect. Every shared glance becomes meaningful. Every door that closes a little too softly is suspicious. Every teacup placed too close to another person's saucer is cause for a raised eyebrow. And just like that, the entire boarding house descends into a week of romantic surveillance. It's not that relationships are prohibited, they're simply complicated, because in a place where the walls are thin and privacy is a concept, any form of affection becomes a public spectacle. Mr. Pierce and Ms. Featherby now can't sit at the same table without Franny humming a wedding march under her breath. Even the cat seems more judgmental than usual, watching interactions with narrowed eyes from its perch atop the parlour cupboard. And you get caught in the middle. It happens when you help the new tenant from room 4 carry a bucket of hot water up the stairs. A simple kindness, nothing more. You barely exchange 3 words, but Franny, positioned strategically on the landing like a hawk wrapped in a shawl, observes everything. Oh ho, she says as you pass. Chivalry lives on? You stop. It's just a bucket, you say. So was Helen of Troy, she replies. From that moment on, the boarding house has opinions. Gunner nods at you a little more deliberately. In the hallway, Ms. Dooley starts offering you strange advice like don't rush things, let the laundry reveal their true nature. Even Mrs. Timp gives you a peculiar look one evening as you reach for a second helping of stew. Not annoyance, just amusement. You start to realise. Romance here isn't about deep feeling. It's about practical arrangements. Who gets access to extra hot water? Who gets to share the clothesline? Who knocks twice before entering the kitchen? In a place where everyone shares everything, walls, spoons, bath buckets, intimacy is risky. It disrupts the equilibrium. It makes people gossip. And yet the boarding house doesn't forbid anyone. It just observes. It takes detailed mental notes. It adds you to its invisible records and draws invisible lines around your name. By Thursday, Franny is keeping a tally. She shows you a small notepad she's titled Hearts and Hearsay. Your name is in it. Light flirting, she's written. Possible shoulder brush. You want to protest, but the boarding house doesn't allow denials. Once the idea of a connection takes hold, it spreads like spilled tea on a newspaper, blurry, irreversible, and somehow everyone's concern. You retreat to your attic that night with flushed cheeks and a spoon you didn't ask for in your pocket. You try to restore your anonymity. You start using a different teacup, a chipped green one with no handle, chosen specifically for its unromantic appearance. You avoid the communal sugar container. You stir your tea with a fork, but it's too late. The boarding house has decided you're involved, and once it's decided, no number of handleless mugs or evasive eye movements can undo the narrative now being whispered in stairwells and laced into the laundry lines. Franny fuels the speculation with relentless accuracy. At dinner, she slides you the salt and says, "Be careful." That's precisely how it began with the tailor and the baker's widow back in 91. You freeze. Salt? You ask. She leans in. Polite passing of a condiment is a very slippery slope. Even Ms. Featherby is participating now. She starts sighing more often when you enter a room, not in disapproval, but in expectation, as if she's emotionally preparing for your wedding. Then there's Mr. Haxby, who never says a word about anyone, quietly handing you a small package one morning. A crumpled envelope of tea leaves. A strong blend, he murmurs. Good for sharing. You open your mouth to explain, to deny, to clarify that assisting with a bucket does not constitute a courtship. But the boarding house isn't interested in clarification. It's interested in the unfolding drama. So you stop trying to explain. You sit through meals with your head bowed and minimal chewing. You nod at the new tenant from room 4 with the rigid neutrality of someone returning a library book. She nods back, clearly aware of the unspoken story that now trails her like the scent of cinnamon and suspicion. The worst part, you don't even know her name. You asked once. She smiled and said, "It's a quiet one." And that was all. Now you're in a one-sided relationship with a woman of mystery, and half the house is planning the guest list. One evening you come downstairs to find someone has added a second chair to the parlour's warmest spot, the one nearest the fire, typically reserved for the fast or the fearless. 2 chairs, side by side. You glance around. No one admits to it. Franny walks in behind you and says, "Just in case you two want to discuss cutlery placement in private." You glare. She curtsies. The new tenant from room 4 doesn't appear that night or the next. Her door remains closed. Her window, still displaying that single tulip, glows faintly with lamplight. You start to miss her presence, not romantically, just for the sake of the story. She provided you with plausible deniability. Without her, you're left with nothing but gossip and that irritating extra chair. So you do something risky. You move it. Not far, just a couple of inches away from the first one. Not enough to be rude. Just enough to imply that perhaps this narrative has gotten a little ahead of itself. Franny discovers it within the hour. "Oh," she says, her voice like honey over thumbtacks. "A lover's disagreement already?" You don't respond, because silence in a place like this is the only real privacy you'll ever get. The next day, the chair is back in its original position. No note, no fingerprints. Just a fresh tulip in the window, bright yellow this time. Hopeful. You sip your tea and consider how nothing in the boarding house ever happens directly. Everything is off-kilter, skewed, revealed through stolen spoons, suspicious laundry, and the positioning of chairs near a fireplace. And somehow, you've become a part of it, not by trying, but simply by existing here long enough. That night you pass room 4 on your way up to the attic. The door is slightly cracked open. A faint scent of lemon and paper drifts out. You pause. From inside, a quiet voice says, "Nice weather for tea." You smile, agree that it is, and continue walking. Because here, affection doesn't need to be reciprocated. It just needs to be acknowledged. It's a Wednesday when the inspector arrives. Not the police, not the tax collector. Worse, the public health inspector. He appears just after breakfast, tall and thin, like a man who measures his food. His jacket is a brown that somehow makes you feel guilty. His shoes don't squeak. His pen is already poised before he even steps inside. You hear him before you see him, the sharp clack of his clipboard echoing off the walls, the sigh of someone writing down a number and not liking it, the low, ominous hum of someone quantifying things that were never meant to be quantified. You're halfway down the stairs when you spot him in the hallway, scrutinising the baseboards like they owe him money. Mrs. Timp stands next to him, arms folded, eyes narrowed. She's dressed for battle, her hair pinned so tightly it's practically armoured, her shawl wrapped at an angle that suggests both propriety and contempt. She carries her ledger like a shield and her tea like a weapon. Steam spirals upward menacingly. "This hallway," the inspector says, tapping his clipboard, "has a draft." Mrs. Timp doesn't flinch, then stands somewhere else. He makes a note. The tenants have all vanished, scattered, melted away. Suddenly everyone has an urgent task. Pierce is polishing imaginary shoes. Ms. Featherby is meticulously sorting dried lavender in her drawer. Gunnar hasn't moved at all, but somehow seems even less substantial than usual. You, the unfortunate bystander, are caught in the open. The inspector spots you. You, he says, pointing, as if you're part of a criminal lineup. Is your room dry? You open your mouth, hesitate, considering the sloping floor, the window condensation, the inexplicable damp patch that smells of regret and turnips. You say, "Define dry." Mrs. Timp coughs pointedly. The inspector frowns. "I'll need to see it," he says. You don't argue. You lead him upstairs, trying not to trip on the uneven steps, trying to recall if you swept recently, trying to mentally will your walls into appearing less beige and mildewed. He walks in, looks around, and makes a noise that might be a scoff, or just his face cracking. He sniffs the air. "Soap," he says. You nod. He scribbles something. "Why does the floor slope?" "Character," you reply before you can stop yourself. He does not laugh. By the time he leaves your room, you've lost 4 hypothetical points and gained a new understanding of subtle hostility. Downstairs, Franny is hiding behind the parlour curtains. "He asked about the outhouse," she whispers. You wince. "Timp told him it was rustic but functional," she continues. That afternoon the house holds its collective breath. The inspector paces the parlour, pokes at the gas fixtures, examines the teacups with surgical scrutiny, and taps the banister 3 times as if it might confess to something. And then he asks the most dangerous question of all. "What do you do about mice?" Mrs. Timp stares at him. We let them vote. There is a moment of silence. Then miraculously he writes nothing. He leaves at 4 o'clock exactly. No one breathes until they hear the gate click shut. Then the house erupts. Pierce cheers. Featherby fans herself with a dish towel. Franny opens a tin of jam and declares it a celebration feast. Gunnar makes a sound that could be laughter or indigestion. You return to your attic and sit on your tilted bed, relieved you survived without being fined, fumigated, or kicked out. And downstairs in the recently scrubbed hallway, Mrs. Timp takes a long sip of her lukewarm tea and mutters, "Let them try, because this house may not be perfect, but it belongs to her." The next morning the house feels different. Not visibly. Everything is still crooked, still creaky, still faintly smelling of boiled food and yesterday's soap. But the mood has changed. There's a strange, cautious pride in the air, as if the house itself stood a little taller under the inspection, like a scruffy stray cat daring the world to criticise its fur. Even Franny is walking straighter. She's pinned a fresh brooch to her collar, one shaped like a thistle. "A symbol of resilience," she announces, "and spikiness." Mr. Pierce keeps rereading the newspaper, though it hasn't changed since yesterday. "I think we genuinely scared him," he mutters, his eyes shining. "He'll never forget this place," Miss Featherby agrees, pouring her tea with new authority. "I hope he steps on a Lego." Everyone nods, even Gunnar. You, however, can't stop thinking about the omissions, because while the inspector checked the mould under the stairs, he didn't notice the loose brick behind the pantry. While he measured the angle of the outhouse drain, he missed the old service bell that still occasionally rings, even though no one touches it. And when he looked into room 4, oh wait, he didn't. He bypassed it entirely. No knock, no clipboard scratching, not even a glance. You remember standing at the foot of the stairs when he walked past it, eyes straight ahead, his pace quickening, his hand brushing the wall as if he needed stability. And that means something, because the inspector, for all his rules and measurements, clearly sensed what every tenant here eventually realises. Some doors are not meant to be opened, not by outsiders, not even with a badge. So you find reassurance in that, in knowing there are still unspoken truths, stronger than official regulations, that the house keeps its secrets better than any locked file or typed report. That night the mood is almost festive. The house has secured another year of peace. Franny bakes a potato in the fireplace and calls it a feast. Featherby brings out her emergency rhubarb cordial, which tastes like a failed love affair but warms your insides all the same. Someone, perhaps Gunnar, produces a harmonica and wheezes out a song that's halfway between a lullaby and a funeral march. And you sit back, sipping whatever's been offered to you in a chipped mug, and look around at the cracked ceiling, at the people who've become more like weather patterns than neighbours, predictable, unpredictable, always shifting, but oddly dependable. At the dusty lace curtain that waves gently even when no wind is blowing. You consider how no number of inspections could ever accurately measure what truly happens here, how the house survives, not by passing tests but by adapting, because its walls aren't just wood and plaster. They are memory and tension and understanding, and the quiet mutual agreement that not everything needs to be seen to be real. The next morning, the tulip in room 4's window has turned orange. You don't know what that signifies, but somehow you feel safer because of it. Morning arrives with the sound of clattering boots, but it's not the usual clatter. Not Gunnar's heavy steps, not Mr. Pierce's ill-fitting tap shoes. No, this is sharper, louder, almost military. You sit up in your attic room, blinking through the slanted sunlight, and listen. The noise repeats, thump, thump, scrape, then silence. Then the unmistakable sound of someone trying and failing to close the front door quietly. By the time you make it downstairs, the hallway has already entered a state of mild disorder. There's a suitcase, an actual trunk, really. Leather straps, brass corners, buckles that look like they've seen battle. It's standing upright next to the umbrella stand, like a guard on duty, and beside it is a man. Tall, thick moustache, a coat so dark it seems to dim the light around it. He's standing absolutely still, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the front hall as if he's about to give a lecture on military discipline or colonial spice routes. Mrs. Timp emerges from the side parlour, her lips even more tightly pursed than usual. "This," she says, gesturing with her tea rather than her hand, "is Major Blythe." The man bows slightly. Retired, he clarifies with all the warmth of a closed book. No one speaks. Then Franny, driven by her boredom, steps forward. Was there a war? The Major doesn't flinch. Several. He says it like he's ordering breakfast. Mr. Pierce edges closer to you and mutters, "I give it 3 days before he's measuring everyone's posture." You don't reply because you're too busy observing Mrs. Timp's expression. It's doing something unusual. It's shifting, not with annoyance, not with suspicion, but with respect. And that's deeply unsettling, because if there's one rule in the boarding house stronger than label your cheese, it's that no one gets automatic respect. Not unless they've been here long enough to earn it, long enough to embarrass themselves in the bath queue, endure Franny's gossip, and share a wash basin during flu season. But the Major, he's already established the correct tone, already claimed the corner seat in the parlour, already made Gunnar move just by clearing his throat. By noon, he's settled into the best chair, brought out his own slippers, black, polished, obviously military issue, and started reading aloud from the newspaper as though everyone requested it. Miss Featherby listens with a dreamy expression. Franny listens with narrowed eyes. Mr. Pierce paces. And you simply wait. Because you've observed this before. The new tenant effect, the initial glamour, the carefully constructed charm, the trunk with no visible signs of travel, the anecdotes polished like parade boots. But give it time, give it 3 days, and you'll know who they truly are. Because in this boarding house, no mask survives laundry day. The mask slips on day 2, not entirely, just a tiny tear. It begins at breakfast. The Major requests porridge, not toast, not eggs, not even Franny's sad grey kippers. Porridge, the kind that demands stirring, the kind that fuses itself to the bottom of the pan like industrial adhesive. Mrs. Timp, to her credit, stirs it herself with a wooden spoon and a face like she's building a cathedral out of beige. The Major tastes it, nods once, then says, a bit thin, silence. You hear Franny inhale so sharply the curtains flutter. Mrs. Timp doesn't blink. She simply turns to Gunner and says, "Tell the Major where we source our oats." Gunner, mid-chew, looks up and mumbles, "Off the back of Mrs. Pettingill's donkey cart, Tuesdays." The Major raises an eyebrow. "Ah." And in that "ah," something fractures the illusion of refinement, the polished veneer. Because now the Major knows the oats were once transported alongside turnips and an incontinent chicken named Agnes. And everyone else knows he knows. The house leans in for day 3. He irons his shirt in the hallway. This is a mistake. No one irons in the hallway, not because it's forbidden, but because the hallway is sacred, neutral territory. It's where secrets are passed in silence, where flirtations glance off the polished banisters, where coats whisper of who's leaving and who's run away again. By the time the Major has plugged in his travel iron, yes, he brought one, the cord is snaking across 3 doorways. Miss Featherby trips twice. Mr. Pierce steps over it like he's in a steeplechase. Gunner just growls and walks right through it. You find yourself observing the entire spectacle from the stairs, mug in hand, wondering how long it takes for the house to consume newcomers, to rub them down, assimilate them, dull their sharp edge until they're just another strange piece of furniture in a stranger's memory. It turns out to be 4 days, because on day 4, the Major is caught singing to his sock, not loudly, just under his breath, a small marching tune half-hummed as he struggles to pull a particularly stubborn wool sock onto his left foot in the upstairs corridor. And Franny catches him. She doesn't interrupt, she just watches, then turns and walks away. And within the hour everyone knows. By dinner the Major is quieter, more careful, no longer reading aloud from the newspaper, no longer commenting on water pressure as if he personally invented faucets. He's just there, wearing slippers, eating toast, avoiding the tulip in room 4's window. And just like that, the house has claimed another, not maliciously, not cruelly, but inevitably, because no one leaves this boarding house unchanged. It reshapes you. Not into something worse necessarily, but something more authentic, less pretense, more honesty. You think of the others, the ones who stayed, the ones who broke, the ones who left quickly and sent back letters with no return address. And now, as the parlour fills with the clinking of cutlery and the rustle of old newspaper, the Major clears his throat and says quietly, "That porridge wasn't so bad, actually." Franny passes him the jam. No comments, no sighs, just a small mutual acknowledgement. It's raining again. Not a polite drizzle, not a poetic mist. Real rain. Relentless, soaking, ankle-deep, umbrella-snapping, Victorian rain. You wake to the sound of it hammering against your attic window as if it's trying to wash the entire boarding house away. The glass rattles, the roof groans. Somewhere below a drain has begun protesting with a gurgling sound. It's on mornings like this that the house feels especially alive. The floorboards hum beneath your feet. The walls seem to lean inward as if listening, and every room below is crackling with damp wool, boiling kettles and quiet curses. You head downstairs, stepping over yesterday's newspaper someone used as a makeshift floor mat. It's already soggy. Franny has tied a dish towel around her head like a pirate and is attempting to dry her socks using the oven door. Miss Featherby is furiously blotting moisture off her romantic novel with a handkerchief. Even the Major looks unpolished. His boots are off, his hair slightly flattened by the dampness, his military dignity wilting at the edges. Then you perceive the sound of water dropping from the living room ceiling. Another drop, and then the sound you've been anticipating, the movement of a retrieved pail. It's perpetually the same location, directly over the faded velvet armchair where Pierce prefers to complete his morning crossword puzzles. The moisture finds the spot every single time, despite Mrs. Timp's meticulous attempts with roofing tar and muttered threats. Pierce looks up with disapproval. Why me? Mrs. Timp sets the pail down with a loud thud and responds without a pause, because the ceiling dislikes your passive-aggressive demeanour. He sighs loudly and relocates to the piano bench. The building shifts like a person settling themselves in bed. People drag chairs, exchange cups, and share the dry areas like wartime supplies. Gunnar begins to boil potatoes, declaring it's the only reasonable course of action remaining. Franny engages in a game she calls Guess That Leak from the hallway landing. Someone, possibly Featherby, has started humming a melody that sounds suspiciously upbeat, and outside the rain continues relentlessly. By the afternoon, the residence has become a kind of refuge. You almost expect a couple of farm animals to wander through the entrance hall. The windows are so heavily fogged it appears as though the house is actively concealing itself from the weather, which upon reflection it probably is, because the rain doesn't just penetrate rooftops and footwear and gloves, it permeates emotional states. People develop peculiar habits during storms, becoming more sentimental, more vulnerable. Ms. Featherby sighs a minimum of 6 times every hour. Pierce mumbles to himself about a woman he once kissed behind a street lamp. Even Gunnar, who generally communicates only in single words and soup, whispers Margaret once under his breath. No context, no elaboration. And you feel it too, the way the humidity enhances the vividness of memories, how the rain tapping on the glass encourages introspection, how even the fireplace seems less about warmth and more for contemplation. You end up sitting on the living room floor with a blanket draped around your shoulders, listening to the gentle drip into the pail and the occasional groan of the walls adjusting to their saturated state. And that's when Mrs. Timp enters, carrying a metal container. No label, no explanation, just a nod and the words, "Time for flood biscuits." Everyone groans. You steel yourself. The metal box creaks open, like a crypt. Inside are pale, fractured circles of ambiguous dough, some sprinkled with what might be dried fruit, others plain. Flood biscuits, Mrs. Timp explains, placing the container with reverence on the piano bench, are reserved strictly for rainy days. They are inedible, yet they are custom, and in this dwelling, custom is absolute. One by one, everyone accepts a biscuit. The rite is performed with gravity, as if consuming a sacred antiquity. You bite into yours and find its consistency somewhere between rock and despair. Franny winces. "Did you add sweetener to this batch?" Mrs. Timp shakes her head. "Never have. Never will." Pierce chews on a corner. Tastes like synthetic foam. Gunnar finishes his in a single mouthful and stares into the distance, as if gathering internal strength. The Major, bless his heart, manages to chew silently, though his moustache twitches, revealing a mild discomfort. And still, nobody declines a second one, because that is the peculiar influence of this boarding house. Even unpleasant things, when shared, gain an unexpected necessity. By the third biscuit, the conversation begins to evolve from complaints about the precipitation to narratives, the kind that emerge only when the sky refuses to cease its weeping. Pierce recounts an anecdote about a French woman who stole both his wallet and his heart on the same evening. Miss Featherby speaks wistfully of a garden she once lived near but never once entered. Gunnar shares the comprehensive plot of a dream he once had in 1987, involving an equine wearing formal headwear. Even Mrs. Timp tells a story about a previous resident who claimed he could sense storms approaching and once predicted rainfall 3 days beforehand with nothing but a nose twitch and a bad feeling. He later moved to the coast and married a beacon. You are unsure if that final detail is accurate, but you listen regardless, because that is what the rain achieves. It draws out the past like moisture from aged timber, softens the rigid characteristics of people, and releases their stories until they drift into the room like vapour from the boiling pot. And amidst the recollections and the biscuits and the drip, drip, drip into the pail, you grasp another truth. The house also remembers. Every flood day the same metal box appears, the same piece of furniture is moved away from the water. The same jokes are made and met with groans and cherished anyway. You lean your head back against the deteriorating wall covering and look upwards. The ceiling mark is expanding again, like a slow-growing mould blossom. And yet there is comfort in it, because it signifies that the house is still performing its function, absorbing the harsh weather so that you are spared. Later that evening, when the downpour finally lessens, Franny cracks open the back door just slightly, enough for a gentle breeze of fresh air to enter. Everyone inhales, no one speaks, but you all experience it, that moment of respite. The biscuits have been consumed, the metal box closed, the stories concluded, but the interior walls feel warmer, the quiet more soothing. Even the flower in room 4's window seems to radiate a bit more brightly in the fading illumination. And as you prepare for sleep, stepping over still damp socks and carefully placed buckets, you contemplate that wasn't just a storm, that was a shared history being formed. There is a scraping sound from within the pantry wall, not the characteristic settling of the house, not the plumbing, not the weather. No, this is sharper, consistent, deliberate. You hear it while reaching for a spoonful of tea leaves. Early in the morning, half awake. You stop, the container in your hand. Scratch, pause, scratch, scratch. You are not the only one who perceives it. By the time you reach the dining room, Franny has already gathered the others. Gunner is grasping a broom like a weapon. Miss Featherby holds a burning candle despite the bright daylight outside. Mr. Pierce is in his soft shoes, armed with a rolled magazine from 1996. Mrs. Timp appears, clutching a cooking pot with both hands. "There is no cause for alarm," she says calmly. "It is likely just the fibre rodents." You hesitate. "I'm sorry, the what?" "Fibre rodents," she repeats. "Every few years they come through the drywall, searching for grain or a place to expire. It is difficult to distinguish their motive." Pierce nods seriously. "Last time they chewed directly through my reference book." The Major appears doubtful. "Surely you mean common pests?" "No," says Franny, her eyes wide. "They are long, excessively long, like fuzzy, elongated creatures with teeth. But more intelligent," Miss Featherby adds. "One of them actually winked at me. I still have the woolen item it damaged." Gunner merely shrugs. I give them names. You suddenly feel inadequate for life here, but now it has escalated into a collective action. Chairs are relocated, baseboards are tapped. The pantry shelving is emptied for the first time in decades, uncovering a collection of old preserves jars and a postcard from Belgium dated 1972. The scratching continues now, positioned higher up. "It is in the partition," whispers Featherby between the chambers. Mrs. Timp scoffs. "Naturally it is. Everything of consequence always is. Eventually it is determined that someone must venture into the confined space. Everyone looks at you. You are the smallest," Franny says gently, which is both accurate and unwelcome. "So now you find yourself with a lamp, a knit head covering, and a biscuit for courage, descending through a narrow opening behind the pantry shelving into the dark emptiness where pipes go to rust. It smells like dust, regret, and a subtle spice. You move forward on your hands and knees, the light reflecting off ancient spiderwebs and discarded utensils. The scratching intensifies, then abruptly stops. Only silence remains. Then from the shadows, a pair of tiny, gleaming, curious eyes. Not a pest, not a wild animal, something different, something that regards you as if you are the intruder here. And then it disappears, sliding silently into the darkness between the inner walls like a classified matter returning to its concealment. You crawl back out, blinking in the light. "Well?" Franny asks, presenting the biscuit like a reward. You accept it and shrug. "Gone." Everyone nods. "No damage done," says Mrs. Timp. "Until the next encounter," murmurs Pierce. And just like that, the furniture is returned. The preserves jars are stacked back into order, and the event concludes. But as you sip your tea and glance at the partition, you have a persistent feeling of being observed. Not in a menacing way, but in a protective manner, as though the house possesses guardians you never noticed before and they have finally acknowledged you in return. That night, the dreams are different. You fall into slumber, expecting the usual chaotic mix: water seeping through ceilings, Gunner frying breakfast sausage while adorned with feathers, Pierce marrying a lexicon. But instead you dream of passages, long narrow channels within the walls. You walk along them without shoes. The wall covering is inverted, the design on the inside. Miniature doors line the route, some open, some slightly ajar. Behind one, a musical device playing itself. Behind another, a picture of Franny, except she is moving her eyes. You wake abruptly, but the dream lingers. That sensation of being in a place just beneath the surface of reality, where the house conceals its most personal truths. Downstairs, the atmosphere feels altered. Everyone is awake unusually early. Ms. Featherby is in the living room, polishing metal that has been dull for years. Pierce is meticulously folding all the snippets of crosswords he used to leave, scattered everywhere. Gunner has swept the cooking area, the entire cooking area. Even Franny is humming as she arranges spoons in disturbingly straight lines. You finally inquire, what is happening? Mrs. Timp doesn't look up from her accounting book. It is settling day, she says. I'm sorry, what? Settling day. It occurs once or twice annually. The house becomes sensitive, agitated. We tidy things up, demonstrate reverence. It helps it to calm down. You look around. Everyone is nodding, and seeing your confusion, Pierce speaks up. I once neglected to clean the wooden handrail. I got a splinter the size of a fish hook. Featherby shivers. I skipped the ritual last year. I couldn't locate my left shoe for 3 months. You comply. You help scrub the banister, correct the angle of paintings that have never hung straight, and clean the top of the large clock, where you find 3 buttons and what appears to be a preserved root vegetable. It all feels strangely ceremonial, like a thorough cleaning for a sacred, haunted place. By the afternoon, the ambience shifts. The air becomes motionless. The rhythmic sounds of the clocks synchronize. Even the floorboards stop making noise, as though the house has taken a massive inhalation. And then a small gift left at your door. A small container. No identification, no message. Inside, a sewing accessory, perfectly shiny, and a folded piece of paper that simply reads, "You belong." You look up and down the corridor. No movement, no voices, just the awareness of being acknowledged. Later, you show it to Mrs. Timp. She smiles. It is confirmed, then. You have been accepted. By whom? She shrugs. Does it truly matter? You are uncertain. But that evening, as you lie in bed, listening to the faint whisper of air through the chimney, you no longer feel isolated. The boarding house doesn't merely accommodate people, it retains them. Their personal histories, their routines, their footwear beneath the stairs, and hair accessories in the bathroom, and faded pictures tucked into private spaces. And now it is retaining you as well. Not confined, just sheltered. You discover the accounting book by accident, wedged behind the heat source in the upstairs hallway, its spine damaged and edges curved like an old folded sandwich. You assume it might be another of Pierce's notebook for crosswords, until you open it and observe the flowing, precise borders drawn in ink. House of Timp. Year beginning 1872. Your fingers pause. You know you shouldn't, but of course you look inside. The initial page is orderly, almost excessively so. Sections labelled name, room, date in, and notes. The handwriting is elegant, formal. You recognise none of the individuals listed. There is a Mrs. Hartnell in room 3, a Mr. Blythe in 6, a Ms. Thornbridge in the attic marked with an asterisk. Beside Mr. Blythe, someone has noted, snored like a folk band, next to Ms. Thornbridge, engaged in conversation with the window treatments daily. They never replied. You continue turning pages. The years pass. So do the occupants, but the observations become kinder, more relatable, funnier. Brought-own toast holder, declined use of householder, tea strength hazardous, vanishes every Thursday, dressed fully in formal opera attire, no reason ever provided, and then your name appears. There it is, your room, your arrival date, but under notes, something different. Hesitant initially, but warming up, definitely one of ours. You do not recall anyone observing you writing shopping lists or getting upset about non-drying socks, but somehow they understood. You carry the volume downstairs as if it were fragile. Mrs. Timp is preparing vegetables at the kitchen table. She does not look up as you place the account book beside her. "I thought we had lost that particular one," she says. "It slipped down there ages ago." You take a seat. You kept track of every single person. We do not keep track of them. The house does. We simply record the details. And these comments. She smiles. That is the method by which the house remembers who. Who requires a softer chair? Who should be seated away from Gunnar during the morning meal? You turn a few more pages. Some are marked with dried blooms. One features a small drawing of a cat in a hat. Another simply states, left. Suddenly left everything else behind. You hesitate. You have had many people pass through here. Mrs. Timp nods slowly. Some leave their imprint, some leave an empty space. You look back down at your own record, one of ours. It feels like being initiated into a group you never formally joined, one with poor maintenance, uneven baked goods, and an appreciation for documenting the exact way you prefer your beverage. Later that evening you assemble with the others in the living room. The fire is burning low. Rain gently taps against the windows. Pierce is attempting a crossword but repeatedly pauses to argue with Franny about alternate words for damp. You bring the account book and for the first time you read an old entry aloud. Mrs. Dobbins, room 4, you state, refused to consume eggs unless they possessed confidence. There is a moment of silence. Then everyone erupts in laughter. Franny says, "I knew that woman." Pierce sighs. "She once threw a small baked item at me, referred to it as instructional." The house vibrates, content, and suddenly your own history here feels incorporated into something much larger. After that night, the account book transforms into something more significant. Not an antique, not a novelty, but a living document. You find yourself reaching for it during quiet times, flipping through pages like a cherished personal journal that is not yours, but somehow belongs to you all the same. Miss Featherby starts adding her own notations in the unused margins, neat slanted comments written with an old green writing tool she claims once belonged to a library employee with poor judgment and excellent footwear. One morning you notice Pierce slipping a folded piece of verse into the binding. It is only 4 lines long, poorly rhymed, and concludes with the words rhubarb gloom. But still he turns red when you acknowledge it. "You did not see that," he mutters. "But you did." And you add a short poem in reply about the troublesome teapot in the second cupboard. Before long it becomes routine. Franny logs everyone's favourite biscuit. Gunnar likes his heavily charred. Miss Featherby requests 3, but only if perfectly balanced. Someone even draws a quick sketch, a comical representation of the Major's facial hair, impressively wind-swept, taking up most of the page. The boarding house does not just hold narratives, it encourages their growth. And somewhere along the way you realise the account book is not truly for the future. It is not an official historical record, not in the traditional sense. It is an ongoing discussion, a silent one between residents long departed and those still moving through the crooked passages. And as you read one particularly strange entry, Beatrice, room 7, claimed she could hear utensils gossiping. It could be true. You begin to observe something unique. Certain names show up repeatedly across different years. The identities are the same, the peculiar habits are the same. Perhaps it is chance. Perhaps it is something deeper. You mention this to Mrs. Timp during afternoon tea. Some individuals loop back, she states matter-of-factly, as if discussing scheduled chores. They depart, they return, sometimes wearing different footwear. But how? She simply shrugs. Places like this, they retain impressions. People do too. That night you stroll the corridor outside your quarters and catch your silhouette in the glass face of the tall clock. The patterned wall covering subtly glows under the gaslight. The air carries a faint scent of citrus polish and damp wool, and you ponder, have I been here already? Not just recently, but at some point before. A different year, a different form, another pair of boots tracking the same mud across the floor tiles. You rest your hand on the ledger's cover before retiring. The binding is warm. It does not open this time. Instead, it feels concluded, as though for now your specific entry is complete, though not finished. Never finished. In the adjacent room, someone laughs while asleep. Downstairs, a porcelain cup rattles gently in its holder, and on the ledge, the flower from room 4 shines like a small fire, its leaves curled like ancient paper. This is a residence that holds memories, and now it holds yours. Rain strikes the rooftop like a rapid ticking machine. You're awake before the others, roused from rest by an indefinable sensation. Not fear, not noise, just a slight pull, as if the dwelling delicately tapped your shoulder and suggested, "Come and look." So you obey. Slippers donned, sweater wrapped over your sleeping clothes, you quietly step down the stairway, past the slumbering portraits in the entry, past the umbrella stand where someone has left a scarf coiled like a serpent, into the drawing room where the book waits, but with company. Next to it, on the embroidered table where nobody ever places anything genuine, lies a message, pale yellow, fastened with a ribbon of blue. Your own name is inscribed on the front, not printed, not typed, written in your familiar handwriting. Your pulse slows, your grip suddenly uncertain, you untie the fastener. Within is a letter from you, yet not quite you. Now it commences. If you are reading this, then you have lingered long enough to sense it. The version of you who composed this is wiser, more composed, still sarcastic. Thankfully. The note is dated 5 years ahead of the present moment and discusses events you have not yet experienced. How the lodging house transformed you. How Mrs. Timp eventually handed over the cookie log with a knowing glance and vanished for a 3-month vacation to the coast, only to reappear with a tropical bird and an etching of a hot drink. How the Major taught you how to polish shoes so expertly they could temporarily blind a clergyman. How Miss Featherby never seemed to age, only accumulated additional felines. How you finally moved into room 3, the one overlooking the damaged chimney stack, because you will want to properly hear the wind. The correspondence concludes with a single sentence. You are secure here. You have always been. You review it twice, then 3 more times. You examine the ink, the curve of each letter, the slight blotch where your finger must have paused while writing. It is certainly yours which prompts the inquiry, when exactly did you compose it? And more urgently, how? You present the letter to Mrs. Timp after the morning meal. She reads it above the rim of her lenses, sipping her beverage. "Ah," she remarks, "it located you." You don't appear shocked. She shrugs. "Sometimes the establishment retains things until they are ready to be read, but I have no recollection of writing it." You do not yet. You sit in silence for a duration, gazing out the rain-spotted pane. Finally she adds, "You are not the first person to receive one." "Who else?" She gestures towards the shelf containing literature, every spine slightly bleached, some with page markers fashioned from transit passes or pressed blossoms. Some of those were written before the authors even arrived. You take a breath. I'm unsure if that fact is comforting or terrifying. She offers a slight grin. Why couldn't it be both? The fire crackles gently. The tea gives off steam, and you start to grasp that the lodging house is not merely a location where time elapses. It is a location where time accumulates. Later that afternoon, something strange occurs with the timepiece. The tall one in the corridor, the one that is habitually 5 minutes slow, always tilting slightly left, always sounding its bell once. At 4 o'clock, for reasons no one can identify, it ceases operation, not with a sudden clatter of internal parts or a loud striking noise. Just quietly. It ticks once, then remains still. Mrs. Timp observes. First she scowls at it like a child who misbehaved, then taps the wooden side. Nothing happens. Gunner retrieves his tools. Pierce brings a dish of shelled nuts, uncertain as to his purpose. Miss Featherby produces a writing instrument and declares, "I had a vision about this." No one knows the correct action, so you are sitting on the hallway rug in your woolen foot coverings, contemplating this peculiar wooden monument to steady movement, now suddenly quiet. And that is when Franny points to something there, just through the glass, a small piece of paper wedged behind the weight. You open the case gently, respectfully, as if the clock might awaken with a start if surprised. The note is aged, neatly folded. The pigment has faded, but not enough to obscure the content. Permit the house to rest. Sometimes it dreams as well. You all look at it intently. "Did you put that inside?" someone whispers. "No." "Has it been there the whole time?" "No." The quiet feels different now, not interrupted but sustained. That night no one attempts to repair the clock. You leave it motionless like a sleeping feline on the window ledge. And the most peculiar thing, the dwelling feels lighter, like it has released a held breath. It is no longer just a place you inhabit. It is a place you belong to. A cadence, a circuit, a recollection woven into others. Later, in your own space, you notice something you hadn't seen before, a scratch on the wall, faint near the baseboard trim. It is your handwriting again, lightly carved, barely noticeable. Third try is the charm. You do not remember creating it yet. It makes sense. You place your palm over the inscription. Warmth vibrates up through your hand. This setting has remembered you more than once, and perhaps, just possibly, you have remembered it too. Perhaps in your nightly visions, in decisions that felt illogical, in the pull you sensed when you first saw the tilted sign that announced lodging available. Inquire within for Mrs. Timp. You settle in bed, the message still tucked beneath your pillow. The clock remains silent, but outside a breeze moves the hanging fabric, and you are convinced, just barely. You hear the residents sigh like a narrative that is not concluding, merely pausing. You awaken to find the structure humming softly, not loudly. Nothing ever is here, but gently, like it is expanding its framework, adjusting its window frames, acknowledging the day with a creak and a nod. It is your final morning. You have not informed anyone yet, not officially, but your travelling case is already packed beneath the bed. The borrowed books returned, the tea container empty, one last cookie taken and left on your window ledge just in case someone or something has a liking for them. You move quietly down the passage. The patterned wall covering, always slightly flowered and slightly bleached, appears to shimmer this morning. You lightly touch your fingers across it. As you pass, it responds with pressure. Downstairs, Mrs. Timp is waiting, as if she has always been aware. She is not seated as is her routine, not knitting or tending to her purple flowers. She is standing near the main entry with a wrapped item in one hand and an expression that is somehow both affectionate and completely practical. "You will return," she states before you can utter a word. "I haven't mentioned I am leaving." She elevates an eyebrow. "You placed your socks in the reverse order. Only people who are departing do that." You stare blankly. She hands you the bundle. It has more mass than you anticipated, encased in coarse paper and secured with common kitchen twine. "What is this?" "A selection of things," she says. "You will discover." Pierce appears next, then Gunner, then Featherby with her feline, who is wearing inexplicably a tiny woven neck covering. No one says anything dramatic. There are no speeches, no tearful goodbyes, only nods, hands resting on shoulders. A food item pressed into your coat pocket for unforeseen events, a pair of mismatched hand coverings that might belong to someone but likely do not. Franny embraces you. "Do not forget us," she whispers. "As if I could," you respond. But, honestly, you are uncertain what leaving genuinely signifies, because the building has become internalized. It resides in how you verify for dry floor surfaces before stepping out of bed, in the manner you now pause beside walls, wondering what secrets are vibrating behind the plaster material, in your choice of herbal infusion, in your puzzle-solving tendencies, in how you articulate the word fasteners like Pierce does, with unnecessary importance. And so, you open the door, step onto the stone entryway, and the world greets you. Outside, the mist sits thick and soft, curling around the edges of the street stones like it is unwilling to release the boarding house either. You descend the steps slowly. The street is recognizable but altered, or perhaps you are the one who has changed. The bakery across the road has its window covers shut. The street lamp maintenance worker is just concluding his route, nodding absently as he walks by. He has the scent of burnt wood and mint. You glance back one time. The sign still hangs a bit crooked, as always. Lodging available. Inquire within for Mrs. Timp. But the windows gleam not with illumination but with retained memories. You are sure you see your own dark outline moving behind the curtains, arms full of laundered items. Franny's laughter echoes faintly through the structure. Miss Featherby's cat observes you from the upper floor, its small scarf gently moving like a signal of departure. You turn away before the sadness becomes too intense. Down the street, turn left at the wrought iron gate, across the small green space where the turf grows unevenly but strongly. Each step feels slightly unbalanced, as if your feet have not quite accepted the idea that they are no longer treading. On wooden floors, softened by the passage of time and spilled tea, you arrive at the edge of the dense vapour and you stop. Then, curiosity too strong to ignore, you untie the string and unwrap Mrs. Timp's package. Inside, one perfectly browned cookie with a small piece missing. Pierce, likely. A miniature glass container labelled "Mist Collected Tuesday." A picture of the main dining area, everyone seated, even you, although you have no memory of the photograph being taken. And the ledger, the exact same one, only now it is completely empty. You glide your fingers over the first sheet. Then you observe the dedication on the inner cover. Fresh ink, clear and assertive. This time it is yours. You close the wrapping slowly, hold it against your chest and continue walking. Wherever you travel next, whatever doorway you enter, you know it will not quite compare. Because there is a residence in your mind now that still knows your identity. A chair that still creaks to your rhythm, a hot water device that whistles when you are feeling low, and a notebook that someday will be filled once more. You do not utter a farewell. You do not need to. The house does not end. It waits patiently. The haze behind you softens and becomes a memory. You keep moving, not because you are required to reach a specific destination, but because the pace feels correct. Left, right, pause briefly. Just like the noisy step near the second-story landing, you still feel it beneath your feet, even here on the exposed paved area. And even though the external world beyond the boarding house has reverted to its usual characteristics, delivery carts passing noisily, birds arguing in a thicket of plants, a bread maker complaining to no one in particular, you retain the quietude with you, that unique stillness of a place that listened when you spoke, even if you never voiced a single thing. Perhaps you will settle in a new location. Perhaps you will discover another dwelling with slanted walls and communicative wall coverings and teacups that possess too much knowledge. But tonight, as you drift off to sleep, wherever that resting place may be, you will feel the same old drawing sensation. That comforting imperfection of a true home that did not simply offer you refuge, it genuinely remembered you. So as your head makes contact with the cushion, take a deep breath. Let it settle deep inside your body like the weight of a thick cover. Let the activities of the day fade. The edges of your consciousness become loose and relaxed. And as slumber approaches, listen just barely for the faint sound of footsteps in a hallway you once were familiar with, a door quietly closing, a kettle beginning to heat. The subtle whisper of a sheet being turned over. You are not alone, not really. The boarding house remains there somewhere or somewhen. And it is holding your place for you. Sleep well.